So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Dot. So we are back with a brand new movie on what if Naruto has Carefull from Akeno for Red Flag movie, but before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. Bachan. Why did you give me this necklace? You don't like it? Then, should I take it back? No. 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 Then why are you asking me these silly questions today? It is just that I don't get presents like this very often, you know. A smile blossomed on that beautiful face. Ah, so that's what the real issue is, huh, Naruto? Why yes. Then you have to get used to it, Naruto. Why? Because I'm going to shower you with gifts once you take this seed of Hokage from me. Really? Believe it? I see. He finally smiled. Blood. An inconceivable amount of blood. Red was everywhere. Everything his eyes beheld was engulfed in the vibrant hue of crimson. The soil of his cherished village oozed with a detestable red liquid of death, while the skies above were shrouded in a somber sea of dark clouds. Everywhere he looked, he found only the chilling silence of death and an aura of sorrow and resentment. It was all his fault. He was the catalyst behind it all. That man with those nefarious eyes was after him. That heinous organization wanted him. Then why do these people have to suffer? Just why? Bachan fresh tears fell to the ground, tainting the already red soil. Why? His fingers tenderly embraced her cold hand. Why did I have to be so late? He murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Why couldn't Nagato complete his technique? He spoke with a hint of frustration, his fingers gripping her palm tightly, desperately searching for any remaining trace of life. Why did he run out of chakra? Blue eyes became lost in the depths of a dull brown ocean. Why did you have to be the one left behind? He stared at the lifeless and weathered face of the elderly woman. A torrent of bittersweet memories flooded his shattered mind. I'm sorry, Naruto. Sorry won't bring him back. I know. If Hiro Sennin was the Hokage, he would have never sent you to that mission. I'm sorry. He wanted to die. There was nothing left for him in this world now. Every person who cared for him was dead. The old man, Iruka-sensei, Hiro Sennin, and now his precious Bachan. She lay there, resting peacefully in his blood-covered arms, lifeless and silent. Her entire body was covered in bruises and a thick layer of blood, however, her beautiful face still adorned that damn warm smile. Why are you still smiling? Raising his hand, he flicked a few strands of hair from her face and tucked them behind her ears. You should be sad too, the cracks in his voice deepened. You left me alone, just like everyone else did. His words faltered as he tried to argue with the lifeless body of his Bachan. You have abandoned me in this cruel world, Bachan. He finally cried out to the lifeless form of the woman. The dreadful silence that followed his outburst only fueled his growing fury. Naruto. Naruto immediately recognized the voice, and as her words pierced through him like icy arrows, his soul froze, shattering the remnants of courage within. Sakura. After some time, he finally acknowledged the girl's presence. The girl known as Sakura stiffened at his gloomy voice. Don't speak like that, Naruto. She exclaimed, capturing the attention of the people around them. You are not to blame for this. Her words resonated with a deep sense of sadness and sympathy, conveying more despair for the boy than for herself. No, you are wrong. I was the one who caused all of this chaos. Naruto retaliated and tried to concede himself as guilty of every single accusation she couldn't shoot towards him. He knew she was sad and wanted to vent her frustration at someone, and why wouldn't she? After all, she was Tsunade's beloved student. After him and Shizune, if there was someone Tsunade truly admired and loved, then it was her, Sakura Haruno. She loved you, Naruto. You were like a family to her, someone she wanted to protect at any cost, Sakura whispered, a fresh trail of tears splashing down onto the damp ground of Konoha. I know, he reiterated in his prior dull voice. She didn't perish in a meaningless death. She died protecting you. I know. She sacrificed her status, her honor, and even herself for you. Everything she did was for your happiness. Sakura's anger finally erupted due to her teammates' lack of response. The pain, anger, and sorrow coursing through her veins spilled out in her words. The horrific sight of her teacher's bloodied body only intensified her emotions. I know. At that moment, fury consumed her, causing her to let out a bone-chilling scream that startled even her closest friends, who were attempting to calm down the frightened onlookers. The weight behind her words was profound, enough to send a shiver down Naruto's spine. Do you really believe you could have saved her? No. She screamed, her hands gripping the collar of his torn shirt. Pain was an extremely powerful enemy, Naruto. Unlike others who had attacked our village in the past, he had no distinct objectives, she snarled. He didn't seek anything from us. All he desired was to inflict pain and misery on our village. My teacher and everyone else who couldn't be revived died because he wanted them to suffer. They were all very dear to you, and he knew that. These sharp words cut through the suffocating silence and pierced the boy's soul. The words that were about to come out of his mouth succumbed when the soft skin of her hands made contact with his cheek. "Naruto, look at me." He couldn't look at her. Her face was covered with tears and he couldn't withstand that. Tears never looked good on her beautiful face. "Let me be, Sakura. I am not worthy of your kindness," he whispered and was about to say something more but had to stop when his lips were forced closed as another hand abruptly made contact with his cheek, but unlike the last time, this time the connection was rough. "Sakura." Shikamaru Nara, who was watching everything from the sidelines, shouted at the girl. "Leave him." His words came out with a deceptive calmness to the civil population of the village, but every shinobi around him could notice the irritation hidden within them. Ino sprang into action as well. "Forehead, give him some space for a minute," she instructed the girl, who in return began to stare at her in surprise. "Deaths are common in the shinobi world. We can't dwell on them for long, but that doesn't mean we can't at least remember the departed soul for a while." Her lips formed a sad smile at the end of her statement as she recalled the passing of her beloved teacher, Asuma Sarutobi. But Sakura was speechless. Her friends and even her best friend was condemning her for her behavior. Instead of chastising and motivating this idiot, they were demeaning her for her actions. "They are right, Sakura." A familiar faint whisper touched her ears, forcing her to immediately turn around. "Sensei!" she exclaimed, raw tears sparkling in her red eyes once more. Kakashi regarded the girl for a while before his eyes veered over to the lifeless form of his now former Hokage, Lady Tsunade. "Naruto," he whispered to the boy who was sitting quietly beside the corpse. "I can feel your pain very well." Pain. To understand others truly, one must understand their pain. "Uzumaki Naruto, one day you will understand my pain." Pain. He was right. Naruto's broken words attracted the interminable attention of others. "We can never truly understand each other, sensei," he confessed as he pressed his palms against the ground to propel himself back onto his feet. "You will never understand me, and I will never understand any of you," he chuckled as he blankly stared at the stunned people of Konoha. "This is our destiny," he whispered, and right on cue, the skies roared in a boisterous clamor of thunder. A somber expression overshadowed Kakashi's face as a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He had witnessed that very expression in the past. The expression of pure bitterness and solitude. He knew it. He had experienced it. "You are wrong," he barely began when his female student did something truly unbelievable. Naruto, fed up with his nonsensical monologue, Sakura cried out and embraced him tightly, a gesture that the boy didn't even attempt to reciprocate. "I don't need to know anything else about you," she hissed as raindrops filled the crevices in her skin, mingling with her translucent tears. "Uzumaki Naruto, you are my friend and the future Hokage of this village." Her words ignited a sense of hope and inspiration within the people of Konoha once more. "Tsunade-sama, Jiraiya-sama, Sandaime-sama and Yondaime-sama all believed in you, Naruto. They not only sacrificed their lives for this village, but also for you, Naruto." Fierce green eyes focused on her teammate for a moment before meeting his deep blue gaze. "Sakura." Kakashi was completely shocked. His mind couldn't believe what was happening. His student, who had never even made an effort to acknowledge the boy's presence, was now encouraging him like no one else. Perhaps it was due to the current situation, but regardless of the reason, he was pleased to see that change in her. Sakura smiled at her teacher. "You don't know, sensei," she began. "I was filled with fear as I witnessed the devastating state of our village. The intense gaze of that monster was terrifying, sensei. It showed no mercy to anyone who dared to cross its path. Even Tsunade-sama, who is known for her bravery, was frightened by those eyes." A tremor ran through her entire body as she vividly remembered the terrified expression on her teacher's face. But then Pain mentioned Naruto's inevitable death to her. A small smile flickered on her lips. And everything changed. I immediately saw the change in her eyes. In that very moment, she looked as if she finally discovered the purpose to fight those eyes. Despite being on the brink of death, she wore a bright smile, as she was certain that you, Naruto, would continue and win the battle. Her anguished cries compelled Naruto to direct his gaze towards her. "She's right, Naruto. You shouldn't blame yourself for everything." Sai, the stoic member of Team 7, emerged from the crowd to speak to his one and true friend. "Those who lost their lives loved you more than anything else," he clarified to the confused boy, his voice filled with genuine sympathy. Right now, if there was anything he wanted, then it was to alleviate the burden from his true friend. Love. A wistful smile replaced the frown on Naruto's face. "I wasted my whole life in search of acknowledgement and love." Sigh. Each word was followed by an increase in the pouring rain, and numerous delicate rivulets of blood began carving their way through the soil of Konoha. "When I finally found them, fate cruelly ripped them away from me," he complained. "Naruto," Kakashi exclaimed, "enough of this foolishness of yours." What?" I said. "Please allow him to speak, sensei. I want to know more about our friend." Shikamaru walked past his teacher and positioned himself in front of his childhood friend. "Tell me more about your pain, Naruto," he urged the boy, eager to delve deeper into the depths of his friend's heart and understand the anguish he carried. If understanding each other's pain was the right way, then Shikamaru was determined to fully embrace it. Kick me or not, idiot or not, this boy was his best friend and he would ensure their bond remained unwavering. Naruto shivered when his eyes met the damp and curious gaze of his friend. It was the first time someone other than Hirosenin and Tsunade had expressed genuine interest in understanding his life. "Everyone I loved died in some way or another, Shika," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, and immediately squirmed when Shikamaru inclined his head towards him, his gaze filled with concern and interest. "The sole thread connecting all their unfortunate deaths is none other than me. I bear the weight of their untimely deaths. Even Iruka-sensei died due to me." Summoning every ounce of courage that remained within him, he managed to whisper his last words. Shikamaru went silent for a while. His sharp eyes, previously fixed on Naruto, were now scanning the various expressions of those around them. Civilians, as usual, were staring at them in curiosity and panic, while the other part of the population, the shinobis, were watching attentively. "I understand. So, what is your next move?" He finally turned to his friend and posed a question that he knew would determine the future of their village. Naruto didn't waste any time answering. "I will try to distance myself from the village as much as possible, just like Hirosenin," he responded with a hint of determination in his voice. No matter the difficulty, he would go to any lengths to protect his remaining friends from the lurking dangers. He couldn't bear the thought of them despising his existence forever. "Uzumaki Naruto, you don't truly understand the depths of human nature. They are incredibly fearful beings, whether they be friends or foe. They fear anything that surpasses their understanding. Gradually, that fear nourishes a seed of hatred within their deceitful hearts, and then, they reveal their true nature." He flashed a fleeting smile to his friends. "Please let me do this," he trailed off. "Please, everyone. I want to become stronger." He turned around and pleaded with his friends, hoping that they would understand his predicament and accept his proposal. "I can't allow you to do it, Naruto," Sai answered firmly, eyeing his friend as if he was the most foolish person on the planet at that moment. "According to one book I have read, one must stay with his or her friends no matter what happens." He added, remembering a quote from a book he had read a while ago. "He's right, Naruto. No matter how much we suffer, I can never bring myself to hate you," Shikamaru said with a sad smile. "I don't blame you for the losses today, because we would have suffered even greater losses if you hadn't stopped Nagato," he grumbled, breaking from his usual demeanor. "We have both lost a precious part of our hearts throughout this whole journey, Naruto. You lost Jiraiya, Iruka, and others, while I lost Asuma-sensei and Shinji. Now that shocked Naruto to no end, because as far as he knew only a select few were not revived by that technique. Tsunade, Iruka, Hinata and Tuchi were among them, but he knew nothing about Choji." "See Choji?" he gasped. Shikamaru sighed and averted his eyes from the boy, feeling a wave of sadness washing over him. He didn't want to cause any more pain, and the tears forming in his eyes only made it harder. Both he and Kakashi were severely injured in the battle against one of the paths, Naruto. Although Kakashi was revived, Shinji, unfortunately, was not as fortunate, he managed to say amid silent sobs. Just as expertly crafted arrows, Shikamaru's words pierced his heart, leaving it wounded with sorrow and pain. "I'm sorry," he said, tightly clutching the hem of his shirt, trying to contain the feelings of desperation and remorse that overwhelmed him. "I'm sorry," he repeated, his words heavy with regret. Shikamaru was suffering yet again because of him. First his teacher, Asuma, and now his best friend, Choji. It was all because of him and the fox inside his abdomen. After what felt like an eternity, Kakashi was overwhelmed with a sense of worthlessness. Witnessing his student in such a vulnerable state, desperately seeking forgiveness from others, was an agonizing sight to behold. It reminded him of the time when he had experienced a similar feeling of being useless, a time when he helplessly watched his teacher make the ultimate sacrifice for the village, while he himself stood idle on the sidelines. Since then, he had pushed himself to his limits to ensure that none of his loved ones would suffer the same fate as his old team members. "Naruto," he murmured, his voice cracking at the sight of helpless Naruto. "It wasn't your fault," he whispered again, for that was all he could do at the time. "Your isolation won't bring them back, Naruto." This time it was Sakura who spoke. Her master was right. Naruto was truly an extraordinary person. Instead of bragging about his newfound powers to them, here he was, begging for forgiveness due to things that weren't under his control, to begin with. They are gone. They played their part. Your apologies will not bring them back. Now it's your time to become stronger and ensure their sacrifices won't go in vain. It's your job to prevent things like this from happening in the future now. Her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. She had never been so openly supportive of him, it had always been the other way around. He had always been there for her, unwavering in his support, so this was a new and unsettling experience for her. She also realized that her teammate was not as happy with his life as he let others believe. Instead, he carried a burden of sadness within him. He had helped many people during tough times, but nobody had ever been able to see beyond his cheerful mask and discover the hidden sadness inside, including her. The thought made her want to hit herself, but it could wait, she had a friend to help. Naruto lowered his head in shame. Sakura was right, sorry wouldn't do anything. I know, he admitted. That's why I have decided to stay away from you guys in the first place. I will travel the world in search of power so that I can protect you from any danger. He declared, shocking everyone once again. Naruto. Kakashi, Sai, and Shikamaru exclaimed simultaneously, disbelief etched on their faces. They were shocked by what they had just heard. Naruto, a boy who had always longed for recognition and validation from others, was now choosing to spend his time in solitude. The whole idea seemed completely absurd and unfair to him. You are already incredibly strong, Naruto, Sakura reasoned with the boy, desperately hoping that he would reconsider his decision. Naruto smiled sadly to himself. I'm not strong. No. You are very strong, Naruto. She retorted. You are the strongest among us. Just one look at you was all it took to inspire confidence in each and every one of us. Radiating with resolution, Sakura kept unleashing her heartfelt and encouraging words upon Naruto. While she was doing that, Naruto just ignored her words as his eyes drifted back to Tsunade's lifeless body for one last time. X. Why do you constantly irritate her by calling her Bachan, Naruto? Because I like calling her that, Iro-senin. HMPH. You always make fun of us, brat. Show us some respect, you know. Respect? Hahaha. What is that? Laugh as much as you want, brat, but I promise you, one day you will regret not showing us the love and respect we deserve. X. Fresh tears welled up in his eyes once more. Sakura, how many people did I manage to save? He asked, his blue eyes regarding her with quiet intensity. What kind of question is that, Naruto? Naruto remained still, his gaze fixed on her bruised face. Just answer me, he urged the girl. Sakura was rendered speechless. There was nothing she could think of at that moment. The mere sight of him being so fragile and helpless was enough to shatter her heart into a million pieces. Let me answer it for you. None. Naruto answered, his voice turning bitter as he continued. I couldn't even save Hinata, one who selflessly sacrificed her life for me. Then how can you call me powerful, Sakura? His words were cold yet at the same time held an inconceivable amount of sadness within them. Sakura looked at the ground in shame. I need more power, Sakura. He whispered. What are you going to do for it, Naruto? Naruto smiled sadly at his friend. He didn't know why, but her words were fueling his hunger for power even more. Perhaps it was because she was one of the few people left that he could call his friend. For now, I am uncertain about the path I will take, but one thing is certain. I will find a way to achieve my goals. You can count on me for that. He assured her. I have always believed in you, Naruto. The girl finally looked up and smiled at him, her bruised face revealing no trace of the sadness that was overwhelming her. Sakura realized at that moment that nothing could prevent him from leaving. When he was determined to do something, no one could stop him. Understanding this, with a heavy heart, she stepped forward and hugged him, desperately trying to hold back her tears in front of her beloved friend. Naruto tensed at the touch, but as time passed, he gradually returned the embrace. He sensed her trembling, intensifying his already mounting guilt over his planned actions. They remained like that for a moment longer before Naruto reluctantly concluded that it was time to leave, and so he gently pulled away from her. Sakura offered no resistance as she felt Naruto's warm embrace release her. She knew that this might very well be the last time of them meeting face to face, and she was determined to make the most of it. Summoning all her courage, she attempted to break the promise he had made to her years ago. However, she was unable to do so, as she was taken aback by what Naruto said next. Also, I will bring Sasuke back to our village. The entire area fell into a hushed stillness, as did Sakura, who gasped at that very moment. I can't give you an exact time limit right now, but remember, no matter how far I go, your words will always be there to remind me that I still have to bring that idiot back to your team. I will not disappoint you. He smiled at her. At that precise moment, the entire population of Konoha received the answers to the myriad questions that had been swirling in their minds. However, in the mind of one particular girl with pink hair, there flickered a glimmer of hope. A hope that she could reunite with her beloved teammates once again. A hope that her friend would find the peace that he so undeniably deserved in his life. While Naruto sprinted off into the distance, her thoughts gravitated towards Nagato's final words. My eyes perceive something extraordinary in you, Uzumaki Naruto. You are similar to me, yet distinctly different at the same time. Your choices will shape the future of this cursed world. Therefore, to guide you on your journey, I bestow upon you my vision. She held her hands up to her chest as she sent a plea to the universe that Naruto would find what he desired out there. I wish you the best, Naruto. Ooh. Naruto was at peace. After that horrendous disaster, which was his awkward interaction with those people, everything had changed for him. Long gone was that stupid blonde knucklehead who wanted the attention of others. Now, he was just a normal shinobi and all he wished for was peace and power. After that conversation with his friends, he decided to leave Konoha right away. He understood that living there wouldn't grant him peace, especially with his teacher and Sakura, who still had deep concern for him. Even if they had left him alone, there would always be someone trying to interrupt him or attempting to draw him back into their eccentric group. He no longer wanted to be associated with any individual or group. At this moment, he aspired to be recognized as a wanderer in search of the power to save the world. Bing. A smile spread across his lips as he caught the melodious sound of his stove. Pushing himself to his feet, he leisurely made his way to the paradise of his home. His tiny, yet magnificent kitchen. A place where he usually spends most of his day now, endeavoring to learn every recipe present there. He was certain that if Am or Tucci were still alive, they would have been delighted with his progress. They had tried to teach him several recipes, but he always declined, insisting that he had them and Shizune to cook for him. Ah! He sighed in delight as the heavenly aroma of steaming ramen and miso tickled his nose. No matter how many recipes he collected, nothing could compare to the exquisite flavor of miso ramen. It was truly divine. The food of the gods, he whispered as he savored the tantalizing aroma. Ha! Who would have thought I would become a master? Ai. He screamed as the scorching hot steel met the tender skin of his fingers. Idiot. Dumbus. How foolish. He chided himself for his own lack of judgment. Now, where could those gloves be? His eyes wandered around the room, searching for the vital tool of his culinary endeavors. Ah. He smiled triumphantly as he finally spotted his beloved premium edition green oven mitts resting on the countertop. Anshmtenen. There, he chuckled as the mittens finally made contact with his palm. This jutsu is so useful, he murmured as he carefully lifted the cooker from the heated surface of the stove. I should thank Nagato for it, but am I gonna? Nah. Lifting the lid, Naruto immediately stepped away from the silverware to protect himself from the flavorful and hot steam of the food. Shinra Tensei. He sighed in relief as the steam quickly escaped the house through the ventilation system. I should thank that man, he thought to himself, but then decided against it once again. That man didn't deserve anything from him. He was a lunatic who had taken everything away from him. Oi, he pinched himself to shield his sanity from the rising negative feelings. The perverted old man and granny wanted to see me live a happy life, and I won't let them down, he exclaimed as he untied his cooking apron and eased himself onto one of the chairs placed around the grand dining table. The lavender eyes shimmered with excitement once more as a moderately sized Chinese bowl was delicately placed before him. Now, let us embark on a journey of flavors, he whispered, reaching for the smooth wooden ladle. With graceful movements, he dipped it into the velvety broth simmering inside the pot. Gently swirling the broth for a moment, he then set the ladle aside and skillfully collected a generous portion of the fine liquid. There, he couldn't help but smile as his eyes evaluated the contents of the broth. Everything was perfect and he knew it. Perfect, he hummed when the broth finally filled the bowl. I still can't believe I can make things as amazing as this masterpiece. His hand subsequently reached the nearest drawer and plucked out a pair of chopsticks. Snap. Like a delicate work of art, the wooden ornament splintered into two perfectly symmetrical pieces. Thank you for the meal. He whispered. Now, let us savor this masterpiece. The smile adorning his face failed to conceal his boundless enthusiasm, he brimmed with pride over his achievements. Bliss, he exclaimed, fluttering in ecstatic delight. It's absolutely incredible. Raising the chopsticks, he eagerly took another mouthful. The broth could have used a hint of spiciness, though, he couldn't help but notice the slightly bland texture of the liquid. I will definitely remember to add more spices next time, he assured himself with determination as he resumed his delicious meal. Ooh. Ria's Gremory, the princess of the underworld, was not pleased with her current life. Despite having everything one could ever desire, she still longed for something greater, something extraordinary. Some might label her as insatiable and selfish, but that was simply her nature. After all, greed was an integral aspect of being a devil. A devil was meant to embody all 7 sins. And her greed was one of them. Throughout her entire life, she has been an ambitious woman. She has always yearned for everything, from the most precious toys to associating with the most valuable members of the peerage she could find for herself. She had never settled for anything less than the best. For her, wealth and quality were above everything, but that didn't mean she never changed her principles. Surprisingly, and with great regret, she did change her opinion about the world. That girl made her reconsider. Akeno Himejima. The girl, an angel, a queen, and, most importantly, her best friend. Akeno transformed her, completely changing her life for the better. Little did she know, but she was grateful that it happened. When she first encountered Akeno in the forest, Ria sensed something amiss with the girl. She appeared so average, almost alarmingly so. Her attire, her figure, her countenance all utterly ordinary. She was the antithesis of Ria's. If Ria's were the moon, then Akeno was the radiant sun. Unlike others, Akeno had a remarkable ability to truly embrace life and all its imperfections. She lived every moment to the fullest, accepting flaws as an integral part of her being. Ria's, on the other hand, could never understand this. Flaws irritated her, appearing like unsightly scars marring the pristine beauty of the moon. No matter how enchanting one may be, flaws inevitably catch the attention of others, tarnishing the allure. I longed for a life as ordinary as hers. And behold, there she stood, yearning for a life that could mirror the normalcy of her closest friend. For, could there be anything more extraordinary for a demon than experiencing the mundane? Typically, devils did not desire a run-of-the-mill existence, especially with humans. However, she, Ria's Gremory, was not a typical devil. Ara. Ria's jolted upright in panic. Fuck. She cursed under her breath, realizing that she must have been heard. I never imagined that you desired to lead an ordinary existence, Princess, Akeno said, gazing into Ria's greenish-blue eyes with a mixture of amusement and contentment. You could have simply asked me, my dear king, she playfully suggested, giving her elegant eyebrows a slight wiggle. Akeno. Ria's exclaimed, her voice filled with frustration. Why didn't you bother to knock before coming in? She scolded her friend. It was clear that Akeno was becoming bolder and careless day by day. Akeno giggled, her face taking on a mischievous look. When did I start knocking on your door, Ria's? She asked. Ria's opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her friend was right. She had never knocked on her door before. The embarrassment swelled within her. Oh, she grumbled, attempting to conceal the burning shame. I must have said it by mistake, Akeno. Her senses rebuked her for the feeble excuse she had just used, especially in front of Akeno. The Queen of Ria's blinked. Huh? Leave it. Akeno hesitated, then blinked again. You're acting rather strange, Ria's. Is this because of Riser? She could have easily ignored that question, but she allowed her curiosity to roam freely through her thoughts. Ria's expression soured upon hearing the mention of that moron. Why on earth would I waste my thoughts on him, Akeno? Her lips curled with disdain. Who knows? You might actually be starting to develop feelings for him, Akeno said playfully, fully aware that it was a risky comment. However, the priceless reaction she received from her friend made it all worthwhile. As if he's worthy of it, she snorted at the statement. Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. By the way, how is Issei handling all of this? She had nearly forgotten about the unusual member of her peerage, the one who potentially possessed the power to free her from the restraints of that treaty. I don't know. The last time I checked on him, he was busy staring at your chest, she replied. But that sounds like a completely normal boy to me. Her lips curved upward as a rosy hue of embarrassment tinged her friend's cheeks. Ria's coughed several times, again and again, but that color didn't flicker away from her cheeks. He is quite a pervert. Akeno finished it for her friend. Ria's lowered her head in shame. Yes, she murmured. Do you believe he will be able to defeat the Phoenix? She inquired, stating the most obvious question. Now, that question made Akeno contemplate something. Unlike Ria's, she didn't ponder much about the boy. Did he possess a formidable weapon? Yes, but did he truly possess the talent to wield it? No. He was a playful individual with a silly yet cute dream of becoming a harem king. His only redeeming quality was his sacred gear, aside from that, he was useless to them in any sort of combat scenario. I'm not sure, he may or may not. It all depends on how he awakens his gear, she admitted. Sometimes I think I should leave everything, Akeno Ria's confessed to her best friend. Why? I don't want this type of life anymore. I want to live freely like you. Free from the expectations of my family name and the pressure of this contract. Akeno rolled her eyes at her friend who was once again acting like a typical rich teenage girl forming an anime. Do you honestly believe you could survive without all these luxuries, without your family, without me? Her words may have carried a hint of bitterness, but they held undeniable truth. Having grown up alongside this girl, Akeno was intimately familiar with her unusual personality. Ria's Gremory wanted to be known as Ria's, just Ria's. I don't know, but I want to try. Ria's words caused Akeno to visibly recoil a bit. What? To say she was surprised would be a massive understatement. Akeno Himejima was utterly stunned. Yes, Akeno. I want to go on an adventure, a journey to a very faraway place. A place where no one knows about me. A place where I can find him. The red-haired devil whispered with a faraway look on her face. Akeno smiled at the girl, her innocence shining through. I hope your wishes come true, Ria's, she chirped. Really? Ria's was cut off abruptly as the purple skies of the underworld rumbled with the sound of thunder. What is that? Akeno gazed out of the window, her eyes scanning the skies. It was highly unusual for thunderstorms to form in the netherworld. We must. Her words died in her throat as a deafening roar, a roar that commanded everything to halt, reverberated through the vibrant purple sky. Before the two girls could react, a beam of shimmering purple light pierced through the skies and descended toward them. Rias, who was overseeing everything unfolding, swiftly pushed her queen aside from the path of the light. Rias. Akeno screamed in horror as her friend was consumed by the mysterious energy. Rias looked at her friend and smiled sadly. It happened too fast, you know. I couldn't let it hurt you. Her eyes twinkled with tears as she watched her body disintegrate into tiny particles, almost as if someone were erasing her very essence from the world. Akeno didn't hesitate for a moment before she also pounced on her friend, hugging her tightly. I will not allow you to go anywhere. She murmured, smiling with tears in her eyes, as her own body started to mirror the same reaction. Akeno. Rias desperately cried out, but her warning came too late. The Link. In an instant, they both disappeared completely from the supernatural world. The last thing they heard was muffled shouts coming from the other side of the room. Uo. Uzumaki Naruto found himself caught in a bind, his mind racing to find an escape route from the predicament before him. It all began with a grave error on his part. I shouldn't have eaten this much. Now, who is going to clear this mess? He slumped into a state of depression, his gaze avoiding the mountain of dirty dishes that had accumulated in the sink. Let it be known that he despised cleaning dishes as much as he adored devouring a bowl of flavorful ramen. The process of washing dishes seemed utterly pointless and tiresome to him. After all, who truly enjoyed this task? It did not offer any rewarding outcomes. Oh, how I wish the Rinnegan had a technique for cleaning dishes. He lamented, looking up to the heavens. After all, it was a dream one could only dare to have. An intense smell assailed his nostrils. He grimaced and gagged in disgust. It was truly repulsive. I suppose I have to handle this on my own, he sighed. It was moments like these that made him keenly feel the absence of someone by his side. When Shizune and Tsunade were alive, they used to take care of all the work while he would just slack off on the couch like the dumbass he was. They must be laughing at me from above, he pouted while his hand gently plucked out a small bowl from the sink. Can I at least have one of them back, God? He whispered with a smile on his face. The thought of having them back in his life was enough to brighten his mood. Skies rumbled. Wait. Naruto interrupted his work as the entire house began violently shaking from the power of the storm. Are you really going to send them back? He asked, his gaze fixed on the quivering ceiling, an eager smile plastered across his face as he anxiously anticipated the result. He extended his hands forward, eagerly anticipating the arrival of the person he was waiting for. Suddenly, there was a loud snap directly above his house. Huh? The flickering grin on his lips faded as he detected a presence directly above his house. A presence devoid of any trace of chakra. Damn. Naruto blinked. Who are you? He asked the girl who was uncomfortably resting in his arms. Blue eyes locked onto him. The owner of the piercing gaze attempted to speak but ultimately chose to stay silent. It was uncomfortable for her, he thought. I asked, who are you? He warned her as he withdrew his hands back to his body, causing the person to drop on the ground in the process. With a sharp gaze, he closely observed the individual. In an instant, his swift hand snatched a kunai from the nearby desk, its sharp tip aimed at her. Speak, he cautioned once again. There is a noodle on your face. Naruto's eyes blinked in confusion at the strange comment. Once again, the girl gazed at him with her enigmatic eyes, void of anything but amusement. There's a noodle stuck on your face. She couldn't help but stifle a giggle as she watched him struggle to regain his balance, his gaze fixated firmly on her. Naruto's face withered in disappointment. Are you an idiot? He scolded the strange girl for her odd response. Really, what was wrong with people? Here he was trying to get to know her, and all he was getting in return was mockery from her side. That managed to gain a reaction from the girl. What? Her red hair fluttered in the wind as she struggled to articulate a response to his rude words. How dare you call me an idiot, you stupid human? A soft growl escaped her lips. What was truly wrong with this human? Here she was trying to help him with his hygiene, and all she was getting in return was mockery from his side. Stupid human. The disappointment on his face intensified. Aren't you human too? He asked, his shoulders slumping as the words left his mouth. In response, the girl smirked at him, an air of superiority emanating from her every pore. I don't know, she retorted, rolling her eyes and crossing her arms, clearly irritated by the barrage of foolish questions the human was asking her. While she was coming out as normal on the outside, inside it was a very different situation. Her senses were in overdrive, struggling hard to find a fraction of the energy inside the boy. He doesn't have any type of energy, she inferred, her skepticism growing as she studied the boy. The boy in front of her was like a living contradiction to the principles of the supernatural world. Snap. Startled, her whole body shivered as the equipment that the boy was holding in his hand flew past her face, narrowly avoiding her cheek. Huh. She gasped as her lips formed a perfect O when the tool suddenly uprooted itself from the rigid surface of the wood and swiftly returned to his hands. What words withered in her mouth when she saw the tool glide back towards her. Snap. An icy shiver ran down her spine at the clatter of metal. Fuck. Who is this guy? A drop of sweat rolled down her neck as she attempted to discern the identity of the boy or faction he belonged to. He possessed an overwhelming aura, she could sense that, and it made her uneasy. Allow me to introduce myself, she finally decided to break the tension in the hall. Engaging in a fight with him would only be pointless. Instead, she needed to remain composed. My name is Riaz Gremory, she stated confidently, her lips forming a small smile to make the boy feel at ease. Naruto stared at her for a second, his eyes flickering with curiosity, before a delicate smile graced his lips. I'm Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto, he introduced himself, his voice filled with warmth and genuine interest. The girl was not exuding any ill feeling, so he relaxed his stance and recalled his kunai. You're not from Konoha, right? He inquired because as far as he knew, there was no Rit present in Konoha. The village was predominantly populated by blondes or black-haired individuals, with the occasional splash of exotic hair colors like pink or purple. Konoha? What is that? Riaz furrowed her brow upon hearing the foreign name. She had no clue what the hell this boy was talking about. From the sound of it, the word seemed to have some connection to Japan, but she couldn't recall any place named Konoha there. Naruto took a seat and gestured for Riaz to do the same. Well, he started after the girl finally settled into her chair, you're not familiar with Konoha. Her simple shake of the head gave him all the information he needed. What village are you from then? He asked and had to stop himself from sighing when the confusion on her face amplified 1,000-fold. What are you babbling about? I don't know anything about a village, the girl exclaimed with utter exasperation. Where in the world was she? Who was this strange boy? And why did he seem so drained of energy? Countless questions flooded her mind with each passing second. I am from the underworld. I am a devil, the princess of Gremory House. Assuming that the boy would finally be able to understand her true origins, Riaz decided to reveal her secret. She knew she was taking a risk by unveiling her secret, but she needed to find out more about her whereabouts right now. Naruto was taken aback by the unexpected response. Devils. A princess. What on earth was she talking about? Underworld. He laughed, finding the name she had given her imaginary home quite amusing. It was rare to encounter such an interesting person amidst his war-torn world. Perhaps she was trying to lighten the mood with her jokes, or maybe she was genuinely trying to fool him by saying these stupid things. Is he laughing at me? Riaz gawked at the audacity of the boy. If there was someone else in his spot, then that person would have been begging for her sympathy. But he is just giggling like a fool, she thought to herself. After a moment of intense consideration, it clicked inside her mind. If she wasn't convinced before, she was completely confident now. You're a ghost. She declared. After all, only they could conceal their energy like this. Naruto's face lost all traces of amusement, morphing into a blank expression as he heard the girl's accusations. Hot confusion and irritation resonated in his voice. Was this girl serious? Him, a ghost. The dude whose face turns paler than Orochimaru's upon the mere mention of a ghost, being one himself. Come on. Her eyes beamed at him. You can't hide now, ghost boy, she affirmed in an arrogant touch to her voice. Only ghosts reside in such an isolated place, she added as an afterthought. Sometimes even she couldn't believe how clever and quick her mind was. Umbus. Naruto interrupted her. How could I possibly be a ghost? He questioned. I just touched you a moment ago, didn't I? Raising his hand, he gestured at her head with his index finger, as if questioning what was going on inside there. Riaz recoiled in embarrassment. She was at a loss for words as her mind was too preoccupied with repairing the damage to her pride caused by her recent act of foolishness. Who are you, and where am I? The hope in her voice faded, leaving her completely clueless and helpless about her current situation. All she knew was that she was lost in this strange place with this mysterious handsome boy. Wait, handsome boy. She squeaked on the inside. His lips curved downwards as he observed the change of emotions on Ria's face. She may have acted a bit disrespectful to him at the start, but looking at her now, he realized that she was just an ordinary girl who had lost herself in this wilderness. I'm a shinobi, he added and stiffened when she looked at him with hopeful eyes. Those eyes stirred something deep within him. Shinobi? She asked. The word sounded very familiar to her. She was sure she had heard it somewhere. Do you know anything about ninjas? he asked, and a smile almost appeared on his lips when the girl slowly bobbed her head in the positive. I see, Naruto grabbed the kunai again, but did not make any threatening movements this time. He simply remained seated and still. Rias disregarded his actions and immediately started scrutinizing him with her ravenous and thrilled gaze. Where is your mask? After a thorough examination that lasted a minute, she questioned him, unable to locate one of the most crucial pieces of equipment for a ninja. Her words made him cringe at their glaring ignorance. I don't wear a mask, Kakashi-sensei does, he responded, hoping that the girl would stop her inspection of him. Unfortunately, his plea fell on deaf ears. You're a lame ninja then, her words only served to annoy him further. But you can still help me get back to Kuo, right? Her smile wavered as the boy gave her another blank look. Don't tell me he doesn't know about Kuo too. She thought in a panic. Kuo? His words were like a nail in the coffin. You don't know about Kuo? She exclaimed. And what about Kyoto? She pleaded. After all, who didn't know about Kyoto? One of the most popular cities of Japan. No. Okay, he didn't. Tokyo? No. Osaka? Japan? No. The United States? No. Naruto sighed, finding the situation truly repetitive and boring. This strange girl fell from the sky into his arms and started spouting a list of what he assumed to be names of places, ones he was completely certain didn't exist in the world. After all, what sort of person named their place North Korea? Seriously, he could have come up with more convincing names in his sleep. He snapped back to reality as a poking sensation grazed his cheek. Swiftly swatting away the intrusive finger, he redirected his gaze towards Rias. There, he found her withdrawing her hand with an adorable cute pout on her face. Boy, Mr. Fake Ninja. Did you even hear what I said? Naruto felt a surge of irritation as he heard the phrase fake ninja. He was not a fake, damn it. He was one of the coolest ones to exist. Determined to seek revenge, he nonchalantly turned his head and lazily retorted, Did you say something? He smirked when he saw the look of surprise and rage on the girl's face. The blonde was fortunately rescued from the sinister fury of an angry devil girl by the most unlikely of allies. Squelch. Oh, come on. He rolled his eyes in annoyance and groaned when he noticed a tiny stream of water gushing out from the nook of the kitchen door. It was things like these that made him wish, from time to time, to escape to a new world. A world where he could cook endlessly without ever worrying about these petty and meaningless chores. Hey. His words startled the girl, who had been gazing at him intently. You mentioned that you're a devil, right? He inquired. Yes, Rias quickly but uneasily answered his question, her earlier rage vanishing. Her nerves heightened as his face lit up with a radiant smile. However, her anxiety quickly multiplied when she caught sight of the cunning gleam in his foxy eyes. Then clean the dishes and mop up the water, he instructed, wisdom emanating from his every word. Once that is done, you can use your powers to journey back to your home, he added smoothly. Rias was stunned. She couldn't believe that such a simple idea hadn't occurred to her before. I'm stupid, it was the most straightforward solution, and she berated herself mentally for not thinking of it sooner. Alright, she whispered. Naruto's eyes widened in amazement. Really? He couldn't believe his ears. The girl was actually willing to wash the dishes for him. Perhaps she wasn't as terrible as he had initially thought. Yes. She isn't a devil, she's an angel from heaven. Naruto felt a newfound admiration for the girl. It was the first time that someone around his age was willing to help him with his chores. This fact alone was enough to make the girl stand out in his eyes. You know, you may act silly at times, but deep down, you are definitely a kind and beautiful girl, tomato. He didn't realize when the words left his mouth, and before he could do anything, a raging rain of red enveloped Ria's face. Oh no. I shouldn't have called her tomato. It seems like all this cooking is starting to mess with my head, he thought to himself, and winced as a sharp pain shot through his body, as though someone was slapping him from the inside. What are you talking about? Ria's mind was in chaos. She didn't know why, but his superficial words had awakened something inside her. Something very delicate, to be precise. Perhaps it was because he was the first person to acknowledge her as an ordinary girl, or maybe it was the way he had complimented her. Whatever the reason, she had a feeling that trouble was looming ahead. Naruto was thoroughly confused. Why isn't she hitting me for my recklessness? He wondered, thinking of it as something impossible. Despite not understanding, he was genuinely grateful for it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, he apologized with a small nod, acknowledging his behavior. You see, I live alone here and there's nobody to help me with all this work. So, when you offered to help, I got really excited. The explanation was quite uncomfortable, and Naruto was relieved that it had finally come to an end. Oh, her lips curved downwards. So that was the reason behind his compliment. Of course, I will help you, a fake smile bloomed on her delicate flushed face. At first, she had no intention of helping him and had acknowledged the latter part of his proposition. The one that involved her using her powers to summon herself back into the underworld. However, after hearing him and seeing his embarrassed face, she realized that she couldn't just leave without helping him first. Naruto observed her for a moment, captivated by her presence, before a happy smile lit up his face. She reminded him so much of someone he held dear. Despite not needing to, she selflessly offered him her assistance. "Come with me," he began to say, but before he could finish his sentence, a sudden knock on the door disrupted him. "Stay here for now. Only come outside when I tell you to," he ordered her, his expression turning serious. "Wait," she pouted. "Silly cosplayer," she sighed, glancing at the kitchen door. She said with a mischievous grin as she observed the chaotic state of the kitchen. "Let's give him a surprise." "Oh. Is everything alright?" Hiru, the leader of the patrolling squad, asked the boy as he carefully examined the crumbled state of the roof with great curiosity. Naruto didn't respond. At that moment, he was intensely glaring at him and his associates. "What are you doing here, dimwit?" He questioned the man with an unwavering seriousness and a cold voice. The man retorted, his expression twisted with disdain. The strong bitterness emanating from his face was unmistakable. There was no doubt that he despised the presence of the blonde boy. "I have arrived to investigate the recent incident, Kikby," he growled, his voice devoid of any semblance of tolerance. "Then examine the surroundings. Why are you inspecting my house?" "Because your house is the focal point of the disturbance. Now step aside and allow us to conduct our investigation. We witnessed an object being dropped into your house." "No." Hiru's calloused fingers twitched in frustration as his order was outrightly refused. "Are you truly that dense, Kikby? We serve under the authority of the daimyo. Challenging our orders is out of the question. My command is unquestionable." The level of arrogance emitted in that statement was unfathomable. It was as if Madara Uchiha himself was lecturing Naruto on civilian matters. "Your command can go and fuck itself in the deepest chamber of hell. I am neither in the fire capital nor anywhere near Konoha. Your authority may hold sway in those regions, but here, only the powerful prevail." The power emanating from his blue eyes silenced Hiru and his friends. If the trio had any further plans to argue, they were silenced when Naruto raised his hands and began to form seals. "Leave my house, you donkeys," he added firmly to his warning. "Pathetic," Hiru taunted, his voice dripping with disdain. "Do you think these little tricks of yours will scare us away, Kikby? Try your best, because I have seen worse." "Who said I wanted to scare you?" It wasn't what Naruto said that frightened Hiru, it was the way he said it. His words were indifferent. "I never meant to scare you. Why would I? You're quite a sport, Hiru, always there to irritate me with one problem or another." The smile Naruto gave him sent shivers down Hiru's spine. "What I intended to do was." The blonde halted abruptly when he witnessed one of the men fling his beloved vase off the table. Shizune, his blue eyes became engulfed in the ominous shade of lavender as ripples emerged all over them. Hiru's breath halted. "Shinra Tensei." Faster than anyone could comprehend, Naruto extended his hand towards one of the subordinates of Hiru, and the result was instantaneous. "Ah!" The man screamed in agony as the tremendous force of gravity collided with his body, shattering each and every bone within. Hiru's mouth went dry as he watched his subordinate crash through the sturdy walls of Naruto's house, leaving behind a harrowing path of blood and saliva. Naruto, he was torn between fleeing or being overwhelmed with sorrow over the loss of his subordinate. Fear consumed him, to the point where he completely disregarded the fact that he had just uttered Naruto's name for the very first time. Naruto arched a delicate eyebrow in response. "What?" he whispered, the ominous glow of lavender shining within his eyes. "Why did you do that?" "What? Why did you kill him?" Naruto scoffed at the absurd accusation. "I didn't. The man is still alive," he declared, much to the surprise of the two remaining men, and even pointed out the location of the injured man. "See," the boy added firmly. "He's lying right here, covered in a little bit of blood, but nothing serious," and the words were cut short as he recalled the sickening sound of the man's bones. "Okay, maybe a few broken bones," he lowered his head in shame. He wasn't trying to harm anyone, but that man destroyed one of his most precious gifts. Retribution was inevitable. A surge of courage filled Hiru's heart. It seemed the Kikby boy had no intention of causing harm, which was great news to him. "Taka," he said, turning to his subordinate, who was still shaking with fear, "go and tend to Toyama's severe injuries," he ordered. "Especially his collarbone," Naruto added, contributing his piece of information to the order. Hiru glared at him. "Do not give orders to him. He is my subordinate," he snarled, seething with anger. He wanted to eliminate the boy and rid himself of him once and for all, but he knew that he had to follow the commands of his superiors. The decrees of his higher-ups were unquestionable, regardless of his personal desires. He couldn't go against them. "Now, step aside. I need to inspect your kitchen and bedroom." He attempted to walk past Naruto, but the stubborn boy stopped him once more. "There is nothing there." "As if I can believe you." You have fooled us countless times in the past with your pranks, Kikby. We can't place our trust in you, especially with that man as your Hokage. He will undoubtedly seek answers, and it is my responsibility to ensure I have them on behalf of Daimon-sama. Naruto's body tensed up at the mere mention of Dansma. That old hag won't ask anything, he declared firmly. Haha, the leader of the patrolling squad laughed at Naruto's obliviousness. You really believe that? He asked, and at the subtle nod from the boy, he continued to speak. You are completely mistaken. Do you really think that no one follows you on your extraordinary adventure? He smirked at the boy. He does. Of course. His agents are everywhere in the Fire Country, spread out like hungry flies. By the time we finish arguing here, one of them will have already informed Dansma about this strange occurrence around your temporary house. So now step aside and let me analyze the situation. No need to do that. Why? Naruto closed his eyes, disappointment etched across his face. Rias, he called out, his voice filled with a hint of regret as he reflected on how things had unfolded. He wanted to keep her presence a secret because if other villages learned that he had a girl with him, they would undoubtedly attempt to use her as bait to lure him into their village. He didn't want to be the cause of harm to someone once more. Yes, darling. Hiru's jaw dropped when a stunning girl, with a physique that exceeded his wildest imagination, emerged from the kitchen. He felt a delightful shiver run through his entire body as her stunning eyes met his gaze. She's stunning, were the first words that escaped his eager lips, his longing gaze still fixated on her divine figure. She's stunning, the young man blushed, his heart racing as she smiled at him. Darling, Naruto repeated, trying his best to understand why she had called him that in front of Hiru. Did she not realize who he was? Of course she doesn't, he grumbled internally. Are you Naruto's girlfriend? Naruto's face turned as white as paper when he heard Hiru's question. Hey, you idiot. He screamed, embarrassment evident all over his red face. She isn't. Unfortunately, Rias was a second faster than Naruto. She wanted to have her revenge, and that was the perfect time for it. No, not anymore. I'm his wife now, she said with a small smile curling her lips. I'm Rias, Uzumaki Rias, she finished, unable to stifle a giggle as she beheld the extraordinary spectacle before her. It was amusing, to say the least. Say what? Naruto's wife, he is just a teenager for God's sake. So what? We are ninjas, we can marry anytime we want, and besides, I am deeply in love with my husband. Husband, we don't even know each other. Rias smirked at him. It was time to step up the humiliation. Now he would understand the consequences of calling her an idiot for no reason. Stop playing games, darling. I know you want to keep our relationship private, but we can share with a few trusted people, you know. Now, ask this man to leave so that we can start having sex again. You do want a baby, right? She asked him, putting on her most innocent look that she could muster. In that instant, Naruto's mind went blank. He lost all sense of the world swirling around him. All he could remember was that for some unknown reason, he wanted to have a baby with this girl, as she told him. A baby with his wife. His wife, Ria's wait and no. He finally snapped out of the trance and yelled at her. She was crossing boundaries now. I don't want a baby. I want power. He emphasized, reassuring himself more than her. What? We can name that baby Power then. No, not that Power. Also, since when did you become my wife? He was furious, and she knew that, but it only added to the absurdity of the whole situation. How could you possibly forget, darling? It was the most unforgettable day of our lives, she responded with a small smile, but it quickly faded when she didn't get a response from the boy. If anyone else had been in his place, they would have been fooled by her innocent act, but Naruto didn't react at all. He stood silently in place, his face flushed with a blank expression. Are you done now? He whispered. No. I will not remain silent anymore. I want others to know about our marriage, darling. It hurts me to keep this beautiful bond between us as a secret. Dear fucking God. Naruto couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and genuine awe at how good Rias was at acting. In just a few minutes, his guest had displayed so many emotions that even he, the most emotionally expressive person, was amazed. She not only displayed those emotions, but also acted exceptionally well, to the extent that his friendly rival here was on the brink of a mental breakdown. Rias interrupted him, refusing to let him say anything that might spoil her game. Don't. Just stop. I don't want to talk to you right now. You hurt me. She yelled, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. I have kept my feelings to myself for too long, Naruto. Now I can't handle it anymore. This distance between us is tearing me apart. Now, all I desire is to be by your side. Her words were accompanied by a few fake sobs here and there. But. SHHH. Rias growled, her beautiful eyes blazing with anger. See what you've made me do? I'm crying in front of a stranger, and he's enjoying it. She gestured toward a stunned Hiru who was watching everything from the sidelines. Hiru tensed as all the attention turned towards him. I am, he tried to argue, but a single innocent glance from Riaz did the unimaginable. It silenced him. Sorry for the interruption. I will take my leave now. With those words, Hiru vanished in a flash, stealing one last glance at Ria's voluptuous form. It was truly a masterpiece. Riaz let out a breath of relief and elegantly pushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Deceiving him was quite tough, but I succeeded. So, how would you rate my performance, my dear? She then turned her gaze towards Naruto, and what she witnessed made her freeze in her tracks. Naruto was completely overwhelmed. The multitude of extraordinary events he had experienced in just one day had left his mind in shambles. It all began with a sudden and unexpected encounter with this mysterious girl who seemed to have fallen right into his arms. Then, she dropped another bombshell by revealing that she's a devil, a fucking devil of all things. And if that weren't enough, she then announced herself to be his wife, his beloved wife, who was excited to have children with him. What how where incoherent mumbles escaped from his lips as he grappled to comprehend the situation surrounding him. Darling. Darling. Naruto. Ria's ear-shattering scream jolted him out of his stupor. What? You phased out, the girl whispered, a little uncertain about the boy now. He was behaving oddly, something he had never done before. At least not since she had fallen into his arms. Naruto took a deep breath in order to calm his mind. If he wanted to understand the situation, then he needed to relax first. An agitated mind could never make the right decision, Iro-sennin had told him that. Okay, he finally looked at her and noticed her slight nervousness. He wondered, why is she nervous? Completely oblivious to her inner turmoil. Wait. It suddenly clicked inside his mind. You. He screamed, startling her with his sudden outburst. But right now, he couldn't care less about that. Why did you do that? In one swift movement she had no hope of following or countering, he grabbed her collar and brought her close to his face, forcing their foreheads to touch. Caught off guard, Riaz instinctively reacted to the situation. She let out a fierce growl and forcefully pushed him away, causing him to fall to the ground. What the hell do you think you're doing, you creep? She snarled at him. Instead of answering her question, Naruto rose from the ground and fixed his intense gaze upon her. The once gentle gaze he had held until now had transformed into an inferno, seemingly ready to consume her entirely. Why did you lie to Hiro about our relationship? It was absolutely needless and illogical. Despite his arguments, Riaz remained unfazed, maintaining her piercing gaze fixed on him. Why? I was just trying to help you. That man was calling you names and I didn't appreciate that. Why? She hesitated for a moment, finding it difficult to come up with an answer. I don't know, she finally stammered, unsure of her response. Exactly. You helped me without even thinking about the consequences. What type of consequences? Naruto's face turned serious as he began to explain the problems that surrounded his existence. I am a Jinchuriki, he stated with a momentary pause, taking in her reaction. When she blinked back at him with her striking green eyes, he instantly realized that she had no idea what a Jinchuriki actually was. With a heavy heart and a troubled mind, he decided to share some intriguing aspects of his world with her. Essentially, I am a human sacrifice, he said, offering the most brief and effective explanation without revealing too much about himself. In this world, every major village offers one of their own kin as a sacrifice to attain what could be termed a formidable weapon. My village's leader chose me as the sacrificial lamb and sealed a colossal monster known as Kikbi within me, all in a desperate bid to defend his village. He added, wincing a little as he remembered the painful truth that the man who sealed that fox in him was none other than his own father. Riaz couldn't deny that the mention of the name Kikbi sent shivers down her spine. It was a well-known and powerful name in her world. So, for Naruto to bring it up was surprising, considering he had claimed to have no ties to any city in Japan. And how does it affect us at this moment? She asked, her curiosity piqued. I left my village behind. She didn't need any further explanation. So, you are a rogue. Rogue? No. Shinobi. Yes. I'm currently on the move, trying to avoid encounters with individuals from my past village and other nations who seek to harness the power of the beast within me. And? Naruto's eyes narrowed with intensity. And? You've just ruined my life. Now every village, including my old one, will be after you? Riaz asked, her face filled with disappointment. No, they will be after you now, he whispered, surprising her with his words. You are my wife now. For them, you are a valuable asset that can easily lure me into their traps. That's why I'm asking you to please return to your home. People here in this world are ruthless and malicious. They won't hesitate to harm you just to provoke me. He added, not hiding anything from her so that she knew what she had gotten herself into. What about you? His piercing blue eyes blinked in confusion at her strange question. Huh? He muttered, his mind struggling to grasp the meaning behind her question. Riaz lowered her head in shame. Even if I return home, what's to stop them from hurting you? They can still do whatever they want to you, she whispered, her voice as fragile as a delicate glass ornament. Oh, Naruto chuckled at her unfounded concerns. They will never harm me when I'm alone, he reassured her, trying to ease her worries. Why? His lips curved into a mischievous smile. I can easily kill them or take my own life before they could even lay a hand on me, his words elicited a gasp from her. Feel yourself, she was taken aback by those words. Throughout her entire life, she had never encountered someone who spoke so frankly about death. Usually, everyone was either scared or at least uncertain about it because it meant leaving their loved ones behind. However, this boy spoke as if he had no one. Yes, in this world, you either hunt or be hunted. Those who hold power and honor often choose to take their own lives rather than become slaves, the blonde boy lectured her with the utmost seriousness in his voice. I don't have any family, so I don't have any reason to fear death like others. He added with a shrug of his shoulders. It was too ordinary for him. I see, Ria said, visibly shaken by the knowledge she had just obtained. The mere thought of such a horrifying scenario left a bitter taste in her mouth. What about friends? Do you have any friends? Of course, he must have friends. After all, who doesn't? Depends. Her eyes narrowed slightly. How? Naruto was about to answer her but decided against it when he realized just how much he had already shared with her in the past few minutes. He didn't want to dwell on it, but she could be a kunoichi from a shinobi village. After all, it is common for villages to select their most attractive women for such missions. Men were already quite gullible, but when you mix in seduction, they become utterly hopeless. That is a personal matter that I prefer not to discuss with anyone, he calmly stated, offering a perfectly reasonable refusal to her question. Riaz immediately noticed the uncertainty in his eyes, but she chose to respect his privacy and not comment on it. If someone wished to keep their secret safe, she had no issue with that. Everyone had their own share of secrets to protect. I see, she nodded her head in an understanding manner. Her senses snapped back to reality as the clattering and ripping sounds reached her ears. Confused, she looked ahead and saw Naruto putting some items into a worn green cloth with cute toad pictures on it. What are you doing? She couldn't help but ask the strange boy. Nothing. Her lips turned downward at the response. I can see you packing up, you know, she joked, trying to lighten the mood with her words. However, the lack of reply and reaction only made her attempt seem feeble. Don't stress over it. Just go already. Why? I'm not doing anything to you. Yet. We can't predict what the future holds. You have already given yourself the name Uzumaki. A tinge of red tinged his cheeks when he realized that he had already forgotten her name. Well, shit. That was the first thought that crossed his mind. From what he knew, girls didn't appreciate it when someone forgot their name, and guess what? He had just done that. Scouring through today's memories, he did his best to recall her name, but all his efforts were met with nothing but failure. Rita. He turned around anxiously and swallowed hard as he caught sight of the bewildered expression on her face. Rita? I meant to say, Ria. Ria? The embarrassment was becoming increasingly difficult for him to handle. It was time for him to harness his brain's full potential. Let's see, her name starts with R and ends with Ahim, it's right on the tip of my tongue. A thoughtful look settled on his face as he tried to remember the name of the girl. Ria. No, I just used it. He berated himself. After a minute of intense struggle, it finally clicked in his mind. Ria. You named yourself Uzumaki Ria. All his past worries instantly vanished. Now, he was overwhelmed with excitement as he had correctly guessed her name. Did you just? Of course. I remember your name, Ria. I can never forget such a beautiful name. Naruto offered her a bright smile from over his shoulder, his hand skillfully tending to the clothes and precious belongings. It's Ria. I know it's Ria. Ria's eyes twitched with anger. It sent she was about to yell at him for forgetting her name, but stopped herself quickly when she saw that contagious smile on his face. Unlike his previous invisible smiles, this one was visibly radiant and brimming with happiness and pride. She couldn't understand why, but her heart was determined not to taint that beautiful smile adorning his face. You're right, Rudo, she smirked, looking at him with a playful expression. If he was going to call her Ria, then she would gladly use a silly nickname for him as well. Rudo. Naruto rolled the unfamiliar name on his tongue and winced as he struggled to find any redeeming qualities about it. As he carefully tucked the last piece of clothing into the green cloth storage bag, he proceeded to arrange the ornaments in another bag placed on top of the green cloth. My name is. Ria smiled. Rudo, I know. You don't have to tell me that. I could never forget such a beautiful name. Naruto stopped whatever he was doing. Did she just repeat my words? He thought to himself, completely confused as to why she would do that. There was absolutely no reason for her to do that unless he gulped anxiously, his eyes darting nervously over his shoulder once more. What was your name again? he asked, his cheeks turning a delicate shade of pink as he finished his question. Ria. Pink turned red. No. It's not Ria, he said. What are you saying, Rudo? It's Ria. My name is Ria Gremory. Red turned scarlet. No, he whispered, his blue eyes doing their best to avoid her gaze. I gave you that name. That's not your real name. That is indeed my real name, Rudo, Ria's answered with a smile, trying to hold her laughter back. She was having the time of her life. In the past few hours, she had experienced so many emotions that she couldn't even describe them if she wanted to. From feeling isolated with Naruto to feeling elated because of being alone with Naruto, her emotions had changed like the incredible cycle of night and day. Now, she was a lot more interested in him. No, you are now mocking my genius. This time, packing his belongings proved to be a more tedious task than what he was accustomed to in the past. Typically, he would depart from his beautiful cottage for a few months before returning to its comforts, however, this time things were different. Naruto was going to leave his favorite cottage for a very long time, something that his heart didn't want to do but had no other choice. Come on, the boy whispered to himself as he shoved the last remaining decorative vase into the ceiling scroll. Sometimes he couldn't help but thank the person who invented these scrolls. They were like a blessing from heaven for him. No matter the number or size of the objects, he could instantly encase them within these scrolls, making them entirely weightless. The sole disadvantage of these scrolls was the extensive time required for a novice like him to activate them, and unfortunately, he was struggling with that very obstacle at the moment. What are you doing with those papers? Riaz, who had been patiently observing Naruto from the sidelines, finally decided to voice the question that had been lingering in her mind for some time. She had been noticing him doing something with those papers, but didn't exactly know what. Nothing. Her eyes twitched in response as he spoke to her in a tone drenched with annoyance. Liar, she retorted, her voice brimming with irritation. She could see him vanishing things into those papers, so she wanted to know what was happening. It was nothing but curiosity from her side. I'm not lying, Riaz. Naruto paused what he was doing and turned to look at her, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and annoyance. Already feeling somewhat sad about what he would soon have to do, her incessant questions only made it harder for him to maintain his composure. I'm just sealing things into these scrolls. Yet still, he decided to answer her question, knowing very well that if he didn't, she would keep asking them. Huh? Naruto blinked, observing her as she tilted her head to the side, bewildered. What? He asked, a hint of fear creeping into his voice due to the curiosity he saw brewing in her eyes. If what he had witnessed earlier was a habit of hers, then he was certain she would soon drown him with more questions. Wow. Riaz exclaimed, surprising Naruto by the sudden change in her voice and demeanor. How do you do that? She wasted no time in covering the distance between them and sat beside him. Tell me. The excitement in her voice showed no signs of waning as she glanced at the scrolls, eagerly waiting to learn more about them from the boy. While she was waiting for him to explain the workings of the scrolls, the boy in question was sweating profusely. Why? Well, it was simple. Damn, I don't even know how they function, Naruto thought, feeling a twinge of embarrassment over his lack of basic ninja knowledge regarding these scrolls. Perhaps he should have paid closer attention in class when Iruka-sensei was fervently teaching about these scrolls at the top of his lungs. Naruto. Naruto snapped out of his thoughts and glanced at the girl, only to blush a little when he saw the expression she had on her face. She was, in fact, waiting for him to explain everything to her. They work because of my chakra and store things in a different place. He didn't know what he was saying, but still continued to spew out whatever he thought made the most sense at that time. Fortunately for him, Riaz lapped up everything he told her and smirked at him. Not bad, lame ninja, she whispered, her eyes still lingering on the scrolls. You are quite intelligent, I won't argue with that. Her smirk broadened as she gave him a pat on the back. Hey, Naruto was about to retort but stopped himself, realizing that arguing would only waste his valuable time, something he didn't have much of to spare. He had to quickly pack his remaining belongings and leave before the people from his village could arrive to investigate everything. If that man Danzo was true to his nature, Naruto was certain that he had already dispatched someone after him. Riaz, who was noticing the change in his demeanor, frowned when she saw signs of anxiety there. Based on what she had observed so far, the boy was not the type to be easily frightened. Therefore, if he was troubled by something, it must indeed be quite serious. Are you okay, Naruto? She asked, hoping that he would share something with her. Of course. The answer she received was far from convincing. It seemed as though he was lying more to himself than to her. You seem troubled, she murmured, her eyes gazing intently at him. If there was something at which Riaz excelled, it was detecting lies. Having been exposed to numerous lies since her childhood, she developed a keen ability to easily dissect them. Naruto sighed, knowing very well that she would not stop unless he gave her an answer. I need to leave this place before. His words were cut short by a sudden knock on the door, interrupting him. Fuck. He exclaimed internally as his worst fear began to manifest into reality. They were here, he could sense their presence now. Naruto. Uo. As soon as he opened the door, a blur of pink darted past him and halted in the center of his home. Naruto didn't need to turn around to recognize who it was, he knew her all too well. She was his cherished teammate, someone he could never forget, even if he wanted to. Sakura, he uttered her name, unable to suppress a smile as he did so. Despite his desire to disappear before she arrived, seeing her after such a long time felt good, particularly after everything he had endured in the past few hours. Naruto. Exclaimed the girl as she approached him, her eyes fixed on the peculiar individual seated at the dining table. Since when did you start hiring girls like your pervert sage master? She couldn't resist asking. The appearance of the girl was unlike anything she had ever encountered. In brief, the girl's allure was beyond her comprehension, resembling what Sakura had observed to be typical among sex workers. Upon hearing her question, Naruto spun around and gasped, unable to believe the words that had reached his ears. "Oi, I'm not into this kind of thing, Sakura." He yelled at her, still stunned by the fact that she would even think that about him. Sure, he was trained by some questionable individuals, one of whom stood behind him, laughing, but that didn't mean he was going to follow everything they did in their personal lives. Sakura's gaze shifted from the girl to Naruto for a moment before returning to the girl's face. Then who is she? Her eyes narrowed slightly as she noticed the girl glaring at her for some unknown reason. Your girlfriend? Although she was aware that Naruto had little to no interest in romantic relationships, she still decided to inquire, just in case her friend had changed his mind upon seeing the girl. I'm his. No. Naruto could sense the words Riaz was about to utter and quickly stepped in to cut her off. He didn't want her to embarrass him further. The encounter with Haru was enough, especially while knowing that he would soon share the details with half of the Fire Country. Then how did she end up in your home? Sakura asked as she finally made herself comfortable beside him. She could tell her friend was hiding something, simply by noticing the sweat rolling down his forehead. She fell from the sky, Naruto said, getting straight to the point. He knew there was no sense in hiding anything from his friends, particularly Sakura and Kakashi. They may have arrived to investigate him, but he was certain that if he told them not to, they would not disclose any information to Danzo. Sakura remained silent for a moment before turning to her team, who were also standing motionless, perhaps too shocked to utter a word. Kakashi, Shikamaru, and Kiba stood there, eyeing her and Naruto with a mixture of amusement and disbelief, as if they were witnessing a pair of clowns perform a skit solely for their entertainment. Excuse me? She asked again, still not believing what she had just heard from her friend's mouth. Sakura, he's just joking with you, Kiba interjected, deciding to join the conversation. He doesn't want to tell us anything. His gaze shifted towards Naruto, narrowing ever so slightly upon noticing him sigh with frustration. But. Naruto, it's not the time to joke, idiot. Sakura interrupted with a sharp glare, her patience wearing thin with what she deemed inappropriate antics. But I am telling the truth. Naruto exclaimed, surprised that his friend didn't believe him. He then glanced at his teacher, who continued to stand at the door alongside the rest of the team. Kakashi-sensei, you trust me, right? He fought the urge to groan as the man's laughter echoed in response. Shikamaru, who was silently observing everything, chose that moment to voice his thoughts. Naruto, he called out, a smile crossing his face as he captured the boy's attention. Please tell us what happened, he requested, only to be met with a blank stare from the boy. I just told you what happened, Shika. The Nara boy fought the urge to sigh upon hearing the response. So, she fell from the sky? He asked, finally letting out a sigh when Naruto simply nodded in affirmation. Naruto knew they wouldn't believe him, so he glanced at Riaz, who was sitting motionless at the dining table, and whistled to catch her attention. Yo. He exclaimed, slumping as the girl, instead of looking at him, stood up and began walking toward him. Don't come here, Riaz, he urged, attempting to dissuade her, but she persisted, stopping only when she was standing by his right side. Just tell them how you ended up here. He finished his request with a pleading look on his face. Hello, everyone, Riaz greeted the group with a warm smile. I'm Riaz, Naruto's guest. Her smile broadened with every word, enhancing the warmth of her introduction. She was aware that the group were friends of Naruto, so she refrained from teasing them as she had done with the previous group. I fell from the sky directly into his arms as he was enjoying his noodles. With that, her introduction effortlessly transitioned into the realm of the strange. See? Naruto exclaimed, capturing the attention of those who were still struggling to come to terms with Ria's introduction. I was not lying, his voice dwindled to a whisper, a frown etching itself across his face. She really fell from the sky. His gaze shifted towards Kiba, glaring intensely at the boy. Nonsense. Kiba objected. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. There was no way a girl, especially one as hot and sexy as her, had fallen from the sky straight into his dumb friend's arms. Naruto groaned. "Come on." He shouted at the boy, raising his arms just as he had when the skies had rumbled a while ago. "Look." He then looked at the sky. "I was standing like this as the skies rumbled and suddenly, a loud thunderclap pierced the air," he continued, recalling the events that led to his current predicament. "And then, in an instant, she fell from the sky into my arms." He concluded his explanation, wearing a look of exhaustion on his face. "Bullshit." Naruto was barely holding back his irritation with Kiba and was about to beat the shit out of him when an abrupt peal of thunder rumbled above them, bringing back the memory of when Rias had slumped into his arms. "Oh, hell no." He shouted on the inside as the brightness of thunder blinded everyone around him. "Duo." Naruto found himself in a dilemma once more. He couldn't fathom what was transpiring. It seemed as though someone were attempting to make him the butt of a cosmic joke. Just moments ago, he had been casually celebrating the art of cooking and now he found himself bombarded with countless questions from his teacher and friends. These people didn't know when to be quiet and it was driving him mad. Also, the girl resting in his arms wasn't helping matters at all. "Who are you?" he finally asked, posing the most obvious question of the day. A pair of beautiful violet eyes blinked in confusion as they gazed at him. "Who are you, handsome?" the girl whispered, her voice a mix of calming and unsettling tones, a combination Naruto found particularly chilling, especially after a recent encounter with a similar girl. According to him, it was a recipe for disaster. "I am," he said and clenched his arms around her in order to let her know he was not liking what was happening. "Naruto." The frustration in his voice was palpable and he made no effort to hide it from the people around him. He wanted them to know how tired and done he was with his life and their constant questions. He longed for solitude and the simple pleasure of cooking ramen once more. Unfortunately, just when he believed he had made himself clear and asserted his authority, the girl did the unthinkable. She leaned her face close to his ear and let out a soft moan. "You're being so rough and dominant at the same time," she whispered, her breath sending hot air across his reddened ears. "But I don't mind, as long as it's you, handsome." A series of countless tremors quaked through his entire body as a massive wave of redness flooded his face. Fuck. Naruto had a keen sense for recognizing a dangerous person and just a single glance into the girl's eyes told him that she was exactly that kind of menace. She was wicked and he knew it. Hell, she was even more unpredictable than the other one. If the Redeed was a flame, then this girl was a firestorm. I, he stammered, his words failing him. Just like that, months of isolation and self-training were washed down the gutter. While Naruto was caught in the turmoil of his own conflicting emotions, he barely noticed the way the girl's intense, sharp violet eyes were looking at him, scrutinizing every move he made as though he were nothing more than vulnerable prey caught in her sight. "Are you thinking about the ways you're going to punish me?" she murmured, the seductive timbre of her voice unwavering. "If that's the case, then don't worry about that," she said, raising her hand to trace her index finger along his jawline. "You can do whatever you want to do with," the girl's voice trailed off in a disappointed sigh when the Redeed, who had been standing beside Naruto, abruptly interrupted their conversation. "Akeno." The sound of Ria's voice captured his attention. Naruto looked at her, a mix of confusion and fear in his eyes. "Do you two know each other?" He couldn't help asking, as the enthusiasm Ria's was exhibiting suggested only one thing. They fucking knew each other, and that was far from being good news. He had a deep-seated feeling that if handling the Redeed was a challenge, managing both of them together would be the end of him. Akeno, the girl in his arms, stirred and smiled at her friend. "Rias," she replied in a restrained tone, her displeasure at the interruption earlier evident in her voice. However, her gaze remained firmly fixed on her handsome's face. He was irresistibly delicious in every possible way, particularly those adorable whiskers of his. Naruto caught the expression in her eyes and swallowed hard. Her gaze was emanating hunger, telling him that she was craving something very badly. "Why are you looking at me like this?" he asked, attempting to imitate Sasuke's outlandish demeanor, which judging by her reaction he failed at miserably. Rosy lips curled into a smile. "Nothing, I'm just feeling a bit hungry all of a sudden," she said, extending her fingers to gently tickle the cute whiskers. "Oh my." Her gasp could hardly contain the surprise. "They are real." She nuzzled them once more, causing Naruto to feel incredibly ticklish and strange. Rias, who was watching them, slumped at her friend's behavior. Akeno would never pass up the opportunity to embarrass her in public. "Could you please behave a bit more properly?" Her scolding seemed to have little to no effect on her friend as she just ignored her. "Akeno," she whispered furiously. "People are watching you being stupid." She knew all too well that the gazes of 4 onlookers were fixed upon her and her friend's antics, each with a discerning eye. Imijima brushed off the minor disturbance known as Rias, her focus entirely on the enticing meal before her. "Ignore her," she told Naruto. "She is just jealous of me." Her cold hands glided over his chest, savoring the sensation of his muscles beneath her fingertips. "Jealous of you?" he asked, and for the second time that day, Naruto was taken aback by the girl resting in his arms. There was something odd about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The only thing he was sure of was that she appeared to be the quintessential incarnation of trouble. Akeno stirred in his arms once more. "Yes, after all, you are still holding me in your arms, Naruto-kun," she said, her smile casting a momentary spell over him. There it was again, her uncanny ability to bewitch him. "Do you want a reward?" Akeno's slender arms wrapped around his neck as she positioned her thick rear on his arm. While they were engrossed in their conversation, Ria's, on the other hand, was in complete turmoil internally. Her friend was doing everything in her power to ensure she could never show her face to these people again. "Akeno, please stop this nonsense and leave Naruto alone," she implored, a small part of her struggling to suppress a twinge of envy toward the girl. "I was the first to meet him. His touch, his smile, his embrace, they should all be mine." These thoughts sprang not from pure sentiment but from a simple truth. She was a devil, and greed ran rampant among her kind. She was no exception. "Aw, come on, let me enjoy this she moaned in pain when her bottom made contact with the cold ground. "Naruto, that wasn't very nice, you ruined our moment," her scowl conveyed her feelings sufficiently. "Come on, pick me up and hug me again," she urged the boy, stretching her arms out toward him. A slight quirk of his eyebrow was all she got in response. "No," he replied, avoiding her gaze because he knew he would succumb to those violet eyes once more. Red hair and violet eyes were his weaknesses, something he had only come to realize today. "HMPH," she pouted and eventually stood up from the ground. "So, what were you saying, Rias?" Her eyes finally turned towards her friend, only to widen in surprise when she noticed nothing but anger and frustration in her expression. Rias made her way to her queen and grasped her collar. "You've embarrassed us yet again, Akeno," she exclaimed. "Especially in front of so many people," Rias growled, pointing toward the stunned group as she chastised her friend. Akeno would have responded immediately, but she paused, extricating herself from Ria's grasp. She then turned around to greet the group with a smile. "Hello, everyone," she said warmly. "My name is Himejima Akeno," her eyes shimmered with warmth as she gazed at them. "It's a pleasure to meet you." She concluded her introduction, accentuating it with a charming wink. "Boy, answer me first, Akeno." "Why would I?" Akeno inquired, her gaze wandering in confusion as she blinked at Rias. "You're simply jealous at the moment." "No, I'm not." "BFF, of course." You two don't have to fight." "You don't say anything, handsome." "Don't call him handsome." Kakashi was experiencing the time of his life. He found it hard to believe, it was surreal. After Pain's invasion, he had never seen Naruto so engaged in any discussion. These girls, whoever they were, proved to be extraordinary. Not only did they break through the shell of his student in mere minutes, but they also managed to make him speak like his former self. Had their identities not been shrouded in mystery, he would have welcomed their presence in the boy's life. "They are troublesome," Kakashi couldn't agree more with the genius Nara's assessment. "But which girl isn't?" Again, he found himself in complete agreement. "Girls are born to be troublesome," Shikamaru, the white-haired jonin said, giving a sagely nod to the boy. "And boys like getting into trouble because of them." His words ignited a spark within Nara. "I dislike getting into trouble," he retorted, a scowl on his face. "Do you have a girlfriend?" Kakashi asked the boy with a smirk. "No." Then before the jonin could continue, Kiba cut in, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. "Are you all out of your minds or what?" he shouted. "Instead of interrogating the intruders, you stand here discussing the love life of this lazy ass, sensei." His words carried a wave of silence with them, and soon every action in the room came to a halt. "What do you want, Kiba?" Naruto knew exactly what he was after, but still, he preferred to further irritate the boy. Kiba slumped, sometimes unable to refrain from cursing his luck for the foolish friends he had acquired. Nearly each one was a failure in at least one aspect of life. "Hokage-sama has dispatched us to investigate the situation. I will be escorting these two to the interrogation center," he explained, adopting the politest tone he could muster. Although he knew Naruto didn't even deserve that, he still did it for the sake of it. "No." Kiba already knew what he was going to say, he expected nothing less from the boy. "I'm not asking for your permission, Naruto," he said, his sharp eyes narrowing on the blonde. "I'm informing you." With that, he began to walk toward the girls, ignoring Naruto's groan in the process. "They are not a threat, Kiba. But they are still intruders who we don't know anything about." Naruto sighed, recognizing that his friend would not cease his pursuit at any cost, and he couldn't hold it against him. These girls were still unknown to them, their origins shrouded in an air of mystery. Despite their seemingly happy and harmless demeanor, the possibility of them being enemies could not be discounted entirely. "Kiba." But still, a part of him wanted to save them and help them return to their home. He couldn't understand why or how, but they seemed incredibly familiar to him. The violet eyes and luscious red hair, he knew he had seen them before but couldn't pinpoint when. Leave them. Following his heart, he chose to defend the girls. Enemy or not, they were still his guests. Tiba is correct, Naruto, Shikamaru interjected. These girls require investigation. They could be bait sent to capture you, he explained, voicing his concerns. Naruto attempted to reassure his friends. They are not enemies. However, his efforts fell flat, evidenced by the blank expressions from both his teacher and friends. Then who are they, Naruto? The boy groaned when Sakura asked him the question, having completely forgotten she was there as well. Some girls who fell from the sky and now want to return to their homes, he replied, glancing at the aforementioned girls, who responded with nods of agreement. So, they don't know where they are now. Yes. This time it was Rias and Akeno who answered her question. Sakura gazed at Naruto, her eyes showing nothing but concern. We should take them to Hokage-sama, Naruto. He might be able to help them, she suggested, but instantly regretted her decision when her friend gave her a glaring nudge. That man can never do anything good, Naruto said, his tone serious for the first time that day. His shinobi will either kill them or rape them. The stunned silence that followed his statement was a stark giveaway of the cruelty the man in question possessed. Kill. Rape, screamed Ria's mind, urging her to flee the area immediately. However, she couldn't risk exposing her heritage in front of such a large crowd. That would only irritate them further. I don't want to go there, she whispered, scooting closer to Naruto. Naruto's frown deepened as he observed the fear etched across Ria's face. You both are safe here, he assured them, unconcerned with his friend's arguments. Right now, they were his guests and he was going to do everything to keep them until they found a way to return to their home. No, that goes against the village's rules, Shikamaru stated, hesitant to argue with his best friend but bound by duty and regulations. I promise you, Naruto, no harm will come to them, he asserted, looking to his senior for support. He was relieved when Kakashi promptly rose from his seat, backing him up. He's right, Naruto, we can't let them stay here without proper interrogation, the white-haired Jonin stated. Nothing would happen to them, that's a promise, he declared, extending his arms to pull the girls close. However, he couldn't reach them as Naruto flickered into the space between them. Fine, he murmured. I will bring them there in the evening, I promise. He hadn't thought it would work and was pleasantly surprised when the trio exited the room without uttering a single word. Now the only person left was her. Sakura. He smiled as he looked at her. Naruto, are you alright? Her inquiry sent a gentle shiver through his chest, a sensation that defied words. Of course, life is always good when you are around Sakura-chan, he said, his smile widening to ease the undercurrent of concern he sensed in her. She shook her head at her friend's childish response. I'm glad, she said, pivoting to face him fully. Don't let me down with your promise, Naruto. This time, his smile faltered slightly. Okay. Her heart sank as he gave her that insincere nod. Goodbye, she whispered, her gaze lingering on his silhouette, and in that instant, an intense feeling whirled within her. Goodbye, his voice sounded hollow to her, missing the harmony that once emanated from it. She mustered a weak smile, peering once more into his eyes. At that moment, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. The look in his eyes was the same she had once seen in the eyes of a long-lost friend. She contemplated confronting him about her turmoil, but instead turned to leave quietly. Uo. You said you are a devil, right? Naruto asked irritated, his tone serious and filled with concern. Rias nodded. Yes. Then, with a dismissive wave of his hand, he added, return to your homes. The suddenness of his command momentarily stunned the girls until they grasped the gravity of the situation he was stuck in. Do you want to come with us? Akeno smiled, puffing out her chest at the boy. I can provide you with everything. However, her giggle didn't have the same effect on him as it had previously. No. Just exit and leave me alone. HMPH. She pouted. Fine, let's go, Rias, she informed her king, her hands beginning to form some magical seals beneath them. She gave him one last look, saying, bye, handsome, and, giggling to herself, she waved at him. Rias, on the other hand, was just annoyed by the whole thing. After many years, she finally made a decent friend, but now, due to some foolish reason, she had to leave him and this place behind. It wasn't fair to her. She craved the magic in his touch, yearned to see his smile again. At that moment, her heart simmered with longing. Finally, the word goodbye escaped her lips as she waved to him. He murmured. Her heart leapt as his face brightened with that familiar smile. Can you touch me one last time? Were her final words before she was completely engulfed by the light. Naruto, huh? I'll remember that, she thought to herself. However, her train of thought came to an abrupt halt as the light disappeared beneath the ground. She turned to her queen, seeking some explanation. Akeno. she inquired, her voice filled with surprise and confusion. I don't know. It isn't working. The surprise in her friend's tone was abundant, convincing her that she was speaking the truth. Let me try, she exclaimed, but the result remained unchanged. The light flickered momentarily before vanishing into the ground. What? She stammered, disbelief coloring her tone. It was impossible. Naruto grimaced. The yell she had just let out rang warning bells inside his head. He knew something was wrong. What happened? He asked the two disheartened girls. Naruto, the look they exchanged was beyond anything imaginable. What? His voice faltered. We cannot go back home, oh dear God. He recoiled in shock, unable to accept the truth. But you said you were devils. He accused, his voice trembling. We are, but we still can't go back home for some reason. Fuck. He was doomed. Now, that old fart was not going to leave him. He had every reason to either execute him or imprison him on the spot. Try again, he almost pleaded. I can't take you to that man, he's an animal. His words silenced them. But we can no longer use our teleportation, handsome, Akeno said, her eyes narrowing in distress. How far away do you live from Kuo? She asked. Very far. I'm not even familiar with Kuo. Rias interrupted, her voice tinged with irritation. He doesn't know about any city, so don't bother Akeno. Akeno gasped upon hearing her words. Really? Yes. While they were talking, Naruto sauntered away from them and began to walk towards the corner of the hall where he had left his scrolls and belongings. Rias, finally realizing he was no longer with them, glanced around the room. Her eyes widened when she spotted him, once again engrossed in his work with those amazing scrolls. What are you doing? She asked him, her voice laced with fear that he might be leaving them alone. Gathering all the things from this house, we've to leave before evening. We? Yes. Can't leave you two alone now. Strange. Naruto was feeling strange. As he looked at his beautiful small house, he couldn't help but feel like a little sad inside his heart. His home, the quaint cottage standing before him, was his world. It represented the only thing he had remaining in his life. When he distanced himself from the world and its people, his home became a place that filled him with life and happiness. I'm going to miss you, he thought to himself, a touch of sadness in his small smile as he gazed at the building for a moment longer, trying to imprint its image in his mind so he could always remember it. Are you okay, Naruto? No, he wasn't. He wasn't fine with leaving his beloved house. He yearned to remain in this place indefinitely, to express his feelings to Rias. However, as he caught a glimpse of her and Akeno, noticing their worried expressions, his desire to stay quickly faded away, or at least diminished to an almost indiscernible extent. After seeing their faces, he quickly realized why he was doing what he was doing. I'm fine. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he responded to Ria's question. Rias paused for a moment after hearing his response, her mind working to unravel the truth hidden within his lie. He obviously wasn't happy about leaving his house, and she felt that she was the cause of his sadness. Her presence was forcing him to do what he was doing, and she didn't like it. If you don't want to leave, then you don't have to. We can both take care of ourselves. She wasn't even lying. Akeno and she were devils, beings capable of concealing their presence for as long as they desired. Therefore, hiding their identities wasn't going to be difficult for them. Nah, Naruto dismissed her suggestion, finding it absurd to begin with. I will have to leave this house eventually, so I might as well do it now. He added. Danzo was bound to find him eventually, and once the other villages caught wind of his wife, they wouldn't stay silent either. So, it was best for him to leave with these girls to a secret place, somewhere where no one could find them. Sorry. The Uzumaki boy blinked at the redeed, confused as to why she was apologizing to him. Huh? His voice conveyed the emotion more vividly than his eyes, leaving the girl to quickly avert her gaze. He couldn't help but notice how strange she was for what felt like the 1000th time that day. I'm sorry for the trouble I have caused you with my prank. Ria's voice, contrary to Naruto's, was full of remorse. She realized she was the cause of his current troubles. If she hadn't pretended to be his wife in front of that man earlier, none of this would be happening. Oh no. Naruto exclaimed, raising and flailing his hands in dismissal. You don't have to feel bad about anything, Rias, he added with a smile directed at the girl. It was bound to happen to me sooner or later. So, cheer up. His words were brimming with warmth, which eased Ria's feeling of self-doubt. Also, both of you are now my guests, he gestured towards her and then towards the black-haired girl, who stood a few feet away, appreciating the craftsmanship of the cottage's wooden structure. So, it's my duty to keep you guys safe, no matter how dumb and annoying you both are. He intentionally added that last bit to remind the girl that even though he was being nice, he was still far away from being comfortable around them, especially Akeno. Akeno immediately picked up on the snarky remark aimed at her and turned around to face the boy with a beautiful smile resting on her lips. My, she murmured, her voice taking on its usual charming tone. I'm not dumb, handsome, she began to walk towards the boy inexplicably took several steps back. I'm sexy. Her head tilted onto his shoulder as she whispered those words into his ear. And no. A slight pout replaced the smile on her lips as she gazed at him through the corner of her eyes, conveying nothing but confusion while doing so. Am I not? She playfully inquired, feigning hurt in her voice. I thought you liked me, handsome, her eyes dilated as tears welled up inside them, threatening to spill. I don't like you. Akeno paused for a moment, relishing in his rejection and the unwavering determination displayed on his face. He exuded dominance whenever he tried to treat her coldly, and she found it appealing. I know, she lifted her head from his shoulder and positioned it directly in front of him, her face only an inch away from his own. That's why I like you, her voice was dripping with hunger, an intense primal hunger. Making your heart mine will be a challenge, and that's exactly what makes it exciting, handsome, she whispered, raising her index finger and gently running it along his jawline before cupping his cheek in her hands. Akeno, leave him. I don't want to, Akeno immediately answered. I want to stay like this for a while longer, she added, still not looking at Rias. She knew what expression was resting on her face and she didn't find it exciting enough to warrant her attention. For now, she wanted to savor the side of her handsome's face, especially his whiskers. They were both adorable and alluring, just like her. Leave him. Rias practically shouted, her voice filled with irritation and disappointment. You have already brought more than enough shame upon me, Akeno, she groaned, recalling the manner in which her queen had behaved in front of Naruto's friends. Rias was certain that they would have branded them as fools if Akeno had persisted with her teasing. It's not about shame, Rias, Akeno withdrew her hands from Naruto's cheek and finally looked at her friend, flashing her a confident smirk. You're jealous of me, she giggled as Ria's face turned pink. Jealous of what? Jealous of the fact that I can tease him better than you. Rias wanted to retort but couldn't because she knew her friend was right. Akeno had always been better than her at teasing people. Also, it was unfortunate that Naruto was succumbing so easily to her friend's charms. He seemed to be falling for the smallest of tricks from her friend's side, faster than anyone she had ever seen before. See? Akeno giggled, the sound turning into laughter as she continued to provoke her friend even more. She was determined to show Rias who was better and she wanted to do it right in front of Naruto. The boy needed to see who he was dealing with and determine who was the best for him. I don't want to tease him, though, Rias finally found a compelling argument and wasted no time in hurling it towards her friend, hoping to silence her. Akeno was being too full of herself and she didn't like it. Her friend needed to understand that she was the one who had fallen into his arms first, which is why he was going to be her friend first. Because you can't, Rias. Ria's eyes twitched as anger started to well up inside her. I can, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But I won't, she quickly added, wanting to make it clear to Naruto that she didn't enjoy teasing others. She was a highly respected devil from a very prestigious house. Sure, Akeno scoffed at her friend, finding everything she had heard from Rias up to that point absurd. Anyone can see through your lies, Rias. Right, handsome. She said, turning around to look at Naruto, only to find nothing but a wooden log lying there in his place. Naruto. She called out, hoping for a response, but there was only silence. He left us. It was Ria's time to speak now, her voice emanating shock and fear. He left us because of your teasing, Akeno. Without hesitating, she swiftly moved next to her friend and focused her gaze on the wooden log. Now, all that remains is a mysterious wooden log that he left behind for us, she whispered, her gaze transfixed upon the odd object. Well, his log is long and thick, Akeno murmured, her mind still trying to understand how he vanished without them noticing anything. We can definitely say that he was hard for me, Rias, she firmly stated, concluding her investigation and turning to her friend, expecting further clarification. Akeno. Akeno blinked at her friend and inquired, what? He left us alone, and you're making jokes about his wooden log. Rias sighed, her frustration evident. Seriously, what was wrong with her friend? At times, she couldn't help but feel like Akeno liked teasing her more than anyone else. Well, his log replica is massive, and I'm sure he can't run that far with the actual thing beside him. Akeno, stop. Rias gave up. Let's try to find him first. Sure. Thank you. Can I take this log with me? No. Thank you. I really like it. Uo. What are you both doing? Naruto glanced back at his companions, who seemed to be idly wasting time as they aimlessly wandered in the forest, lost in their own conversations. Currently, they were just outside the perimeter of the place where he had been residing a while ago. The area was incredibly peaceful and captivating, with a luxurious blanket of plants and exotic trees that created a perfect camouflage, allowing them to remain hidden from prying eyes. Until now, they had not come across anyone who was aware of him and his connection with Konoha. Everyone they had met were either wealthy merchants or ordinary villagers from nearby towns who had come to the village for trade or tourism. The only remarkable reaction they received was from a group of intoxicated merchants who started asking about the prices of Akeno and Ria's. Those freaks. How dare they think of me as a prostitute? A gentle smile formed on his lips upon hearing Ria's words. It was obvious from the furrowed frown on her face that she was still annoyed about it. The merchants' unsettling grins and their choice of words must have been too much to handle for her. Don't be so upset, Ria's, Akeno attempted to comfort her friend. They were drunk and elderly. What else could you have expected from them? She chuckled and playfully glanced at her closest companion, all the while struggling to contain her giggles from evolving into uncontrollable laughter. The Gremory heiress couldn't formulate a convincing argument, so she resorted to asserting her dominance over the two by pouting. Whatever, she muttered, her lips curving gently to the side as she gave up and decided to forget about those men for the time being. Let's keep going. I don't want to talk about those wretched humans anymore, she declared and began to march purposefully towards a bemused Naruto. Where are we going? Akeno asked, jumping between the two and discreetly stealing glances at her handsome, unable to hide her growing fascination with him. There was something strangely captivating about him. His cute whiskers, his sparkling eyes, and his infectious smile were all charming in their own unique way. He may not have been the most handsome boy she had ever laid eyes on, but his charm and the sound of his voice made him truly unique in her eyes. Rias noticed the passion in her friend's eyes. Akeno, she tried to divert her attention, but the girl simply ignored her for the sake of her so-called handsome. Akeno, her fingers twitched as bitterness consumed her thoughts. Stay away from him. I met him first. With a firm grip on her friend's hand, she pulled her away from the boy and moved closer to him. Naruto, who was watching them bicker with each other, decided to remain silent on the matter. Girls did ridiculous things while arguing, and his teacher had always warned him to stay away from them when they were doing it. We are heading to a nearby town for now. He still decided to answer Akeno's earlier question. Huh? Hummed the sadistic devil, wiping the dirt from her skirt with her hands. I mentioned that we were heading towards a nearby town, Naruto repeated his words and cast a glance at the beautiful girl next to him, only to scowl at the sight of her clothes, covered in dirt and scratches. He then turned his gaze toward the retreat and noticed that her clothes were in no better condition. You two definitely need some new clothes, he murmured, his eyes still examining their attire with curiosity. They were unique and could easily grab attention, something he didn't want to happen. Ria's lips curled up in amusement. So, you're going to buy clothes for us? Her eyes blinked at him, radiating unexpected innocence. Will you also be assisting us with the decisions, Naruto? Her face lit up when the boy in question blinked at her. It only took Naruto a second to step away from her. Don't give me that look, he groaned. Shopping was not his thing. He loathed its existence. Even as a child, when almost everyone loves shopping, he never enjoyed it for some reason. The piercing gazes of the store owners and the relentless silent comments from people always made it an uncomfortable experience for him. Shopping is so dull, Rias, he exclaimed, wasting no time in expressing his disdain towards the topic. It will be amazing, believe me, Naruto. The boy shuddered when Akeno's alluring voice reached his ears and her eyes, those hungry violet eyes, gazed at him with an intensity that rendered him motionless. He didn't know why, but every time he looked into those eyes, he couldn't help but feel enchanted by them. They were strange. You can say what you want, but I will not change my mind. He snapped out of their charm and affirmed, quickening his pace in an attempt to evade any further questions regarding the matter. Rias giggled as she watched him hurry past them. Humans can be quite interesting at times, Akeno, she whispered, clearly amused by the boy's reaction. He was one of the first humans who had intrigued her so deeply, and she would be damned if she let him slip away now. He belonged to her, a warm desire burned within her chest. Akeno, on the other hand, was torn between feeling amused and being alert. On one hand, her friend had finally managed to pick up the pieces and was returning to her former self thanks to the boy. However, on the other hand, she couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment as she watched her friend fall for the same boy to whom she had already given her attention. She knew it was perhaps a bit early, but the instant their eyes met as she fell into his arms, she realized he was the one for her, or at the very least, someone she should get to know better. In her brief yet remarkable life, she had encountered an array of boys, from towering and tall to minuscule and small, and from earthly handsome to downright angelic. But none of them were able to provoke such a strong reaction as he did, that too, with just a mere touch of his. Yeah, he is quite a delicious catch, her words earned an impressive glare from her friend, but she dismissed it. Stay away from him. The Himejima girl giggled as she witnessed the devil's greed finally reveal itself. Why? Akeno decided to provoke her even more, confident that she could elicit something interesting from her friend. Ria's greenish blue eyes blinked in surprise, struggling to comprehend what she was hearing. What do you mean, why? she exclaimed, unaware that Akeno's words were igniting an even stronger desire within her. I met him first, she whispered as her cold finger brushed against her friend's voluptuous breast, coaxing an involuntary soft moan from her. You can have Issei or someone else, she declared, fully aware of how unfair and absurd her suggestion was, but unable to think of anyone else who would be suitable for Akeno at the present time. Issei was at least quite powerful and had a deep sense of appreciation for them. Akeno shook her head, making no attempt to hide the disappointment she was feeling. Issei or someone else? Really? She strode past Ria's, a blank expression adorning her face. I don't find him interesting, she whispered, her mind recalling how ordinary he had seemed to her during their first encounter. Despite his honesty and kindness towards others, he simply lacked that spark of intrigue. Rias was taken aback by the queen's sharp retort. She was aware that her new team member could be a bit foolish, but she never anticipated the complete lack of interest that Akeno just showed towards him. The boy must have done something icky to earn this much disdain from her usually warm queen. Why? She cautiously moved beside her friend, making sure to avoid infuriating her even further than necessary. Akeno abruptly halted and glanced back, her eyes meeting those of her friend. He idolizes you, sparks of jealousy shimmered in her violet eyes. Just like every other boy, she whispered, her voice devoid of her usual allure. I always feel like I'm the second choice. She didn't want to admit it, but her heart couldn't take it anymore. For too long, she had endured the suffering of being seen as a mere second option for others. Look at me, I'm more fascinating than you, Rias. So, why am I always treated as a second choice by others? She grabbed her friend's finger and pushed it against her chest. Tell me. Her whisper transformed into a menacing hiss, concluding her brief rant. Akeno. For the first time in her life, the Gremory heiress was witnessing this ferocious yet equally emotional side of her friend. It was only the fact that she had known Akeno for so long that was assuring her that her friend meant no harm with her words. She was just slightly jealous of her. Okay, maybe not just slightly, but a tad bit more. She began to speak, but a cold hand, belonging to her friend, halted her efforts. You don't have to say a word, Rias, Akeno smiled, and just like that, the envy disappeared from her gaze. It's not your fault. It's mine, Rias felt her heart shatter as she witnessed that tragic smile on her friend's lips. I'm not interesting enough for others, Akeno murmured to herself, raising her hand to gently tap her head. A bitter smile still lingered on her face. No. No. Realizing that this was her final opportunity to bring some light to the day, Gremory screamed out. You are one of the most amazing people I have ever met, Akeno, she exclaimed as she twirled the girl in her arms, making her spin recklessly through the air. Don't. Oh, come on. A familiar groan interjected into the conversation without warning. You two are still here, and I wasted my time searching for you out there in the wild like a fool, Naruto exclaimed with a pout. Akeno's heart skipped a beat when she saw the endearing pout on her handsome's face. For others, it might appear like a simple thing, but for her, it was everything she needed to smile again after that rant. Cute tenderly, Akeno brushed off those dry lips of his with her cold fingers. Let's go. I'm ready to go anywhere, as long as you're by my side, her silly words and her hands on his lips surprised the boy, causing him to gasp in shock. Boy. Naruto couldn't quite understand what came over him, but the moment her icy hands touched his skin, a strange sensation stirred within his heart. A sensation so intense and foreign that it halted the clockwork inside his body, allowing the girl to do whatever she was doing for a bit longer than he preferred or could tolerate. He didn't want to admit the overwhelming truth, but he found himself actually enjoying the attention she was giving him, especially while adorning that smile on her face. Do you love it? He didn't know when or how Akeno had closed the distance between them, as he was too enamored by the enchanting allure of her deep violet eyes. Once again, something from inside was telling him that he had seen those eyes before, but as usual, he couldn't decipher where exactly. They still felt strangely familiar, yet foreign at the same time to him. No, he answered shortly, firmly drawing the line between them again. I don't like when people intrude into my privacy. It was harsh, he knew, but necessary to avoid an awkward conversation. Rias, who was watching them from the side, clenched her fists in annoyance. She wanted to intervene in the conversation so badly, but she knew Akeno needed this moment and she didn't want to intrude. Her friend right now was having a time of her life and she had no desire to ruin it. Oh, you're no fun, handsome. With that said, Akeno did something that almost made Rias jump in anger. Faster than she could ever imagine, Akeno entwined her arms around Naruto's right hand and swiftly tugged him towards her. Let's go. The queen exclaimed, glancing at her with anticipation. Rias. She whispered, curious as to why her friend wasn't with them. Rias remained silent, her pride refusing to allow her to speak. Instead, she just walked past them and started to trek her way to the nearby town. Her heart was begging her to stop and talk to them, but she refused to heed its pleas. Naruto watched her retreating form for a while, a flicker of concern crossing his face. She was looking sad for some reason. "Okay, follow me," he muttered, letting Akeno keep her hold around his hand. It was uncomfortable, but he didn't want the girl to wander off alone in the wilderness. "Will you miss your home?" Akeno's question compelled him to stop once more. Lost in the depths of his thought and concerns, he completely forgot how close they were to the border of a place he once called home, a place where he had cherished countless moments with his friends and enjoyed his favorite ramen. "No," he whispered, but the sadness present in his voice told a different story. No matter how much he wanted to stay away from the place, he couldn't refute the fact that Konoha was and would always be his true home, a place that was etched into his heart. "Why are you leaving then?" "You can stay here," she said with a smile, casting a quick glance at his face. "For we are capable of taking care of ourselves. No one can harm or assault us so easily." "It's not about that," Naruto whispered. Akeno's violet eyes blinked at him, confusion etching across her face. "Huh?" she murmured. Her reaction earned her a giggle from Naruto. It started with a small chuckle, but soon Naruto was roaring with laughter. "Did you really think I was being serious about those rape and torture threats?" He managed to speak as another giggle escaped his lips, further confusing the girl. "You were not serious." Naruto's laughs died down, and his eyes twinkled with amusement as a beautiful warm smile bloomed on his face. "HMPH." He puffed out his chest. "I can easily kill that man," his words elicited a gasp from the girl. "But that will only attract more attention to me, and nowadays, I prefer to avoid it." The pout he wore on his face after he finished explaining was the most endearing sight Akeno had seen in years. "Why didn't you stay in your village?" Akeno almost shouted, her actions betraying her usual demeanor. Was this boy playing with them? She didn't know, but she hoped for the opposite. Naruto slumped as he saw her reaction. Danzo is a man driven by an insatiable thirst for power, and I'm sure he would have somehow found a different way to achieve his goals through you both, he murmured, his finger gently tapping his chin as he tried to explain the nature of that old man to the girl. "Like what? Forcing me or someone else to have a child with both of you?" Was the first horrifying thought that crossed his mind, leaving him to immediately cast blame on those white-haired perverts. If it hadn't been for them, he might have led a normal life. However, those perverts insisted on showing him their version of the ways of life, commonly known as having sex and having more sex. Akeno's heart skipped a beat as his words reached her ears. They were incredibly soothing, enveloping her in an ecstatic embrace of her dirty fantasies. "Could we please return to the village?" She yelped in pain as her handsome began to forcefully pull her along with him. "Oh, come on. Just one child." She closed her mouth and turned her head slightly to the side to look at him with her hopeful eyes. The idea didn't seem as bad as she initially thought. "You can have as much as you want once we reach our destination." Naruto instantly felt a wave of regret wash over him as the weight of his words settled in. "With you," Akeno exclaimed, undoubtedly excited by his suggestion. If he was ready, then who was she to refuse? Furthermore, their new home required workers, didn't it? Therefore, someone needed to step up and take responsibility for hiring or producing them. "No. I'm not asking for a lot. Just 24. That's too much, Akeno." "Okay, 23. Not a single one with you. Then virginity will be my eternal friend." "Sure." It wasn't long before they finally arrived at their destination. A small establishment hidden inside the greenery of a beautiful and dangerous forest. The atmosphere around the town was incredible, neither too hot nor too cold, just perfect for one to dwell for centuries without a worry. It felt like a place straight out of a fairy tale. "Amazing," whispered Ria's Gremory, the princess of the underworld, her eyes immersed in the breathtaking scenery before her. She had never seen anything so breathtaking in her entire life. Even the sights in the underworld paled in comparison to the beauty of this tiny town. This place was everything she had dreamed of after watching those unrealistic anime shows. Small dirt roads weaved through vast, lush mountains, leading to a scattering of appealing wooden houses. The town was centered around a breathtaking river that meandered through a series of tranquil ponds and was adorned with stunning flowers along its banks. "Is that waterfall real?" she asked her companion, who was thoroughly enjoying her reaction. Naruto murmured in response, "Indeed. That waterfall is just as real as we are." He gently brushed his hair, clearing away the dirt gathered during the long and tiresome journey. They were finally out of the boundaries of Konoha and its allies. The location where they stood was unknown to the rest of the world, so they had no need to worry about uninvited guests for the foreseeable future. It would be quite some time before any of them could even hope to discover this town. "Where are we, really?" Akeno asked softly, her voice filled with exhaustion as sweat trickled down her forehead. She didn't want to admit it, but the trip was incredibly exhausting. Throughout the entire journey, her hero didn't allow her to use her wings, not even for a single minute. Whenever she tried, he always stopped her. As a result, she had no choice but to complete the trip on foot. "Because I need a break," she said, and she wasn't exaggerating. Her shoulders were intensely aching, most likely from the heavy burden they were carrying. "It's called Tsuki no Kuni. My teacher once brought me here and since then, I have always wanted to revisit this place. It's beautiful, isn't it?" He turned his head to Akeno and smiled. The girl nodded in enthusiastic agreement. "Absolutely," her faint words fought to be heard over the forceful gusts of cold wind. "Are we going to settle here?" she asked, the question lingering in the air. The place was breathtakingly beautiful and there was hardly a trace of any other humans around. It seemed like the perfect home for them, a place where they could hide themselves away. His blue eyes surveyed the place for a while. "Yes, we are going to settle here," he didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming sensation of peace surge inside him while uttering those words. It was like a huge burden had been lifted off his heart. Sure, his old home Konoha still had an eternal place reserved in his heart, but after their death, he never felt truly at home in Konoha. It was suffocating there, a bitter reminder of his failures, not only as a shinobi, but also as a human. Shinobis were cold-hearted murderers, and he couldn't relate to them anymore. Unlike them, he couldn't help but feel remorse and agony while causing harm to others, even when they were his enemy. Riaz noticed a distant expression on his face and furrowed her brows. "What's the matter, Naruto?" She approached him slowly, closing the distance between them. He just shook his head and smiled. "Nothing, I was just wondering what my teacher must be thinking right now," he whispered, taking a step towards the small sanctum. "He constantly used to pester me for traveling here, but I always refused his suggestion," he chuckled, remembering the persistent efforts of his teacher to convince him to visit the village. He still didn't know why that man used to do that, but it was intriguing, to say the least. Riaz and Akeno respectfully maintained their silence, allowing him to bask in the cherished memories of his teacher. Silently, they both proceeded to follow him, ensuring they didn't disturb his beaming expression. "Ooh-oh." The sense of nostalgia washed over him when they finally reached the entrance of the sanctum. It was still as beautiful as he remembered, untouched by time. "That pervert really had impeccable taste," he whispered. Be it the places to live or women to enjoy, that man never failed to recognize the finest choices. "Can I finally take a break?" Akeno slumped on her tired feet as she headed towards the gates. Every fiber of her being was longing for some much-needed rest. Riaz smirked at the state of her friend. "Poor Akeno, worn out from such a short journey. And then she talks about defeating me," she giggled to herself, a notion which didn't go unnoticed by her friend, who surprisingly just glared mildly at her exhaustion temporarily forgotten. "Oh, come on Akeno," she muttered under her breath as she began to stride towards her target, Naruto. "How can you be so tired already?" She smirked, positioning herself next to the boy with their shoulders almost touching. Akeno didn't say anything, she just ignored the girl. Her body was aching and all she could think about was finding a place to rest. After taking a few deliberate breaths, she pushed herself back to her feet. Looking around, she finally found a massive stone slab nestled beside the road. It was perfect, she thought. Right now, she wasn't thinking about comfort, her body craved rest, and that's what she was going to do. Slowly making her way towards the stone, she carefully sat down and, without wasting any time, slumped over it. Naruto slumped in confusion at the girl's odd behavior, but decided to keep his thoughts to himself. "Let's go, Riaz," he whispered to the girl beside him and began to walk inside the vicinity of the village, knowing they had a lot of work to do. Riaz cast one last worried glance at her friend before reluctantly following the boy. As they continued their journey, they suddenly came to a stop when they spotted a towering tree standing beside the road. It was huge, very huge. Even the tiniest twigs on the tree were larger than the average branches of the common trees found in their town or village. The branches of the tree were covered in a luscious canopy of fresh green leaves, creating a breathtaking and serene scene. "This is where my sensei and I used to take a break during our journey," Naruto mumbled, hopping down to the side to examine the colossal plant. It was still in good shape, far healthier than the plants in Konoha. The stem was as sturdy as ever, and the size of the giant had only increased since he last laid eyes on it. His teacher was right, this tree in front of him was a sight to behold. It was nature in its purest form and he could sense its raw power. The natural energy here was magnificent, pulsing with life, like a river of power flowing through every leaf and branch of the tree. He wanted to feel it, and so he closed his eyes, immersing himself in the vibrant energy. It was time for him to experience the feeling his teacher used to adore. "What?" he exclaimed in astonishment, tumbling down the lush grass that adorned the surroundings with its greenery. He couldn't believe it. The energy here was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. It was amazing and unpredictable, so much so that the force that immediately caught him off guard. Him, a sage, who was trained to manipulate the said energy. Riaz, who had been watching the whole thing from the side, spread her wings and soared high to come to the aid of her new friend. "What happened, Naruto?" she asked, her sharp blue eyes darting from left to right in search of the intruder. Naruto didn't say anything, he was enjoying the show. After all, it's not every day that he could summon two devils out of the blue, and they both were gorgeous in their own way. One had stunning fiery red hair, while the other possessed captivating violet eyes. Nothing, he finally decided to answer the girl's question as he could see she was growing increasingly anxious. Don't close your wings, though, he added, approaching the girl with a calm and steady pace. Huh? At first, she was baffled, but suddenly everything fell into place in her mind when her friend's icy fingers gently caressed her wings. It was incredible, so intense that she couldn't control herself and let out a soft moan. Her body shuddered, overwhelmed by the intense urge of sensations. What? Naruto's eyes widened as a familiar sound reached his ears. He recognized that sound from somewhere. It was the same sound that he had heard before when he was once eavesdropping on his teacher and those women in his room. He also remembered being told by the pervert that they only made that sound when they were extremely happy. Happy. He wanted to verify his teacher's claims. So, without any prior warning, he pressed the black wing again and began to caress it. Stop Naru, he giggled when the girl started making that sound more loudly. Naruto wouldn't lie, the sound she was making was sweet and he liked it. The only odd thing about it was that her face had turned a deep shade of red all of a sudden. Hey Riaz, he whispered to the girl, his voice filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. Riaz couldn't say anything. The overwhelming pleasure she was experiencing was beyond any she had felt before. Sure, her mother had warned her about the intense effects a male's touch could have on a female's wings, but this sweet and dark sensation surpassed even her mother's descriptions. It was an incredible sensation, and she didn't want it to stop. More, she pleaded, knowing she was being reckless, but she couldn't resist. Her heart was loving every second of it, and so was she. It was the first time she was feeling this kind of special connection with someone. It was like a force was trying to bring them together, and she wasn't against it. Naruto's train of thought was interrupted when the girl unexpectedly gripped his hand and guided it to her breast. Before he could even argue, she placed it on her breast and pressed it onto her soft flesh. Now it was his time to make that sound. Two words perished as soon as she entwined his fingers and began guiding them in gentle circles over her boobs. Wait. He gasped, feeling the warmth of her flesh seep into his fingers, sending waves of pleasure coursing through his body. Something bad was happening, he could feel it, but what? Oi, let me go. He yelled, but the girl didn't even twitch. Then in an instant, his golden eyes transformed to a mesmerizing shade of purple as a pair of Rinnegan finally revealed themselves, and with a final intense glare, they released their power. Fuck. A gentle yet powerful force of gravity collided with the girl, sending her flying a few meters away. Riaz gasped, struggling to catch her breath. It happened so fast that she could not even prepare herself. What on earth, Naruto? She yelled at the boy, glaring with annoyance. Hey, I asked you something. Her words had no effect on him. He had a curious look on his face, like a baby, as he stared at her. Following his gaze, she looked down and gasped in shock at the tattered state of her clothes, as if they were mere threads of silk clinging to her skin, leaving little to the imagination. Don't look. She screamed, quickly spinning around to hide her breasts, her face flushed with embarrassment. It was unfortunate, but she was relieved that her friend hadn't witnessed her in such a compromising position, otherwise, she would have killed her by her taunts. Ho, look what I found. Speaking of the devil, Riaz slumped when she heard a familiar voice from behind her. It was going to be a long day, she knew that. My little naughty naked devil, Riaz, with my handsome, Akeno giggled, but nothing about that giggle was right, both Naruto and Riaz could feel it. It was an accident, Akeno, Naruto was the first to answer. It was truly an accident, he didn't intend for that to happen. It only occurred due to a mutual misunderstanding. I was trying to sense the surroundings, but Riaz got in my way, and I ended up knocking her with my energy, he mumbled, trying to explain with whatever words that were coming to his mind. Akeno's silence abruptly ended as her head snapped towards the towering tree. Whatever, she mumbled, her big purple eyes fixed on the giant tree before her. The sight was breathtaking, she concluded, but her gaze was hardly fixed on the tree, instead, it was exploring the tiny houses nestled beneath the towering tree. They were familiar, very familiar if someone asked her. Shrines. She marched towards the small structures, her feet moving with purpose. Why are there shrines here? If she was right, they were currently wandering in a whole new world. What purpose could these shrines possibly serve here? She gazed at her hero and narrowed her eyes in confusion. These shrines must be dedicated to the old sage of my world, he knew exactly what she was thinking when he saw those purple eyes of hers. She was probably confused by the presence of these buildings in this abandoned place. Iro Sennin told me that his name was Rikidam Sennin, he added, recalling the story of the fabled sage of six paths, the one who laid the foundation of his world. Akeno's delicate eyebrows rose at the new information. "So, you do believe in a deity," the Thunder Priestess spoke. "It's fascinating how these shrines resemble the ones in our world. They bear an uncanny resemblance," she marveled, unable to tear her eyes away from the majestic structures before her. They were a sight to behold and filled her with a sense of serenity in this unfamiliar place. It felt as though she had stepped into her own world again. "I love this place," she whispered, turning gracefully. "Is it possible for me to claim this spot?" She was well aware that they would be staying here, so why not take advantage of the opportunity to secure the most peaceful and oddly familiar location before anyone else could. Of course. There were plenty of other abandoned houses here, so Naruto didn't mind which house she was taking. In the end, he was sure all of them would have ample time and place to live here. Akeno beamed at the boy. "Aw, you are so kind. Let me give you a hug as a reward," she said, cooing slyly as she walked towards the boy. "I promise I will not do anything perverted. Unless," she changed her mind, which sadly, she immediately did. "Don't come any closer or else," he let his words trail off, hoping that the girl would take heed of the warning, but unfortunately, she didn't. His eyes grew wide in massive proportion when the warm breasts of the girl smashed with his chest. Huh? He didn't know what she was doing, but he was feeling a strange sense of comfort. He had shared hugs with girls and women before, but none of those gestures were as delightful as this. Even hugging Sakura never made him feel this content. The closest he had felt like this was when embraced by Tsunade. "I was right." She immediately pulled away from the hug. "You," she proclaimed, poking her finger against his chest, a smug smile on her face. "You're a boob guy," the giggle which followed her words made Naruto shudder, in fear or something else. He really didn't know. Bread began to crawl upon his face. Boob guy, he very well knew what that meant. The pervert had told him about those kinds of preferences, but that didn't mean he was one of them. He didn't have a specific preference. If there was anything he had learned from his adventures, then it was the fact that one should always stay away from the girls, especially from those who possessed remarkable features, they always seemed to cause trouble. Unfortunately, he was not so lucky, as someone from above seemed determined to mess with his life, and he couldn't do anything but welcome the surprises with a scowl on his face and hard thing in his pants. Such was life. Riaz also smirked at the boy. If her friend was going to tease him, then she couldn't resist joining in. "Of course he is. That's why he was fondling my breast so hard." She gracefully withdrew his hands from her huge bosom and smiled when the young boy immediately looked away from her. "You are so naughty yet innocent at the same time, Naruto, but you know what? I find boys like you very interesting," she said, licking her lips seductively. With grace, she rose from the chilly ground, her ample bosom swaying with every movement. That didn't sit well with Akeno. First, her friend tried to seduce her handsome with her tricks and tits, and now she was practically throwing herself on him. Nah, with a smirk of her own, she placed herself in front of Naruto and looked at Riaz with confidence gleaming in her eyes. It was time to assert her dominance in terms of beauty. "He doesn't like your breasts, Riaz. He likes mine." She was about to expose her own heavenly mounds of flesh, but stopped when the sound of rustling leaves reached her ears. Confused, she scanned the area in front of her and gasped when she noticed Naruto was not there anymore. Huh? He vanished. "I can see that, Riaz. But why? Maybe he didn't like your boobs." "Ooh-oh." Naruto let out a sigh of relief as he finally touched down on the ground, far from the area where those two notorious devils were arguing. What was their issue, really? Do all women act like that? Hopefully not, or else he might end up single forever. Where am I, exactly? He finally raised his head to survey his surroundings and was surprised to see a grove of unique trees growing along the peaceful riverbanks. They were completely different and he could tell by the energy they were radiating. The natural energy surrounding them was astonishing, even more so than what he had just witnessed earlier around the majestic tree. "Hero Sennin." He whispered with a faint smile, feeling the familiar chakra of his teacher trickling into his senses. It was barely noticeable, but it was there for him to sense it. But why is his chakra still present here? He asked himself, advancing towards the enigmatic trees. As far as he knew, such a weakened chakra would never be able to last for such an extended duration. If it were truly his mentor's chakra, it would have undoubtedly dissipated into oblivion by now. A flicker of gold danced in his eyes as he drew closer to the river's banks. With each step he took forward, the surging energy within and around him amplified. Fuck. His eyes widened in amazement as a surge of energy coursed through his body. "What is this?" he whispered, sensing thousands of chakra sources lingering around the area. He now had the ability to sense everything, from the presence of animals and plants to the presence of humans living in cities distant from his current whereabouts. It was surreal. "Amazing," he exclaimed, his eyes eagerly taking in the new version of his world, aglow with multiple shades of chakra. Plants were predominantly green, while animals primarily exhibited yellow. "So, that's why that pervert wanted me to visit this place again," he whispered with a smile on his face as the world reverted to its original state. His teacher wanted him to perfect the art of senjutsu, perhaps that's why he always used to frequently visit this specific place. This place was brimming with powerful natural energy, and it would be foolish not to take advantage of it. "Alright, let's explore this area a little longer." His footsteps continued on, navigating through the dense undergrowth and the enveloping darkness of the forest. He was hoping to stumble upon some more intriguing discoveries here, after all, the entire place belonged to that legendary sage. There was no way he wouldn't have left something remarkably useful for his descendants. Who knows, I might find something related to the Rinnegan. His eyes shimmered with excitement at the thought of uncovering more about the enigmatic eyes of God. He was confident that they held some connection to him, as he possessed the ability to subdue them, unlike Nagato. He had the ability to conceal them at his own will, but he could not fathom the reason behind it. There had to be a purpose, a hidden explanation, he mused. Lost in deep thoughts, Naruto failed to notice the looming ridge directly ahead of him. Caught by surprise, he uttered a confused huh. Right before falling off the edge of the cliff. Sensing the danger, the Rinnegan blazed in his eyes, propelling him into the air in a gravity-defying flight. "Phew," he whispered, sweating heavily at his own foolishness. Without these eyes, countless injuries and multiple broken bones would have been inevitable for him a while ago. "I really need to start practicing again," he thought, reminiscing about the days when he used to practice tirelessly, without a care in the world. The sole purpose of his life was to gain enough power to stop Sasuke. However, over the past few months, he had completely neglected everything that had made him what he was today. Naruto had forsaken the path of the shinobi, as it continuously served as a painful reminder of the loss of his loved ones. Though he had become somewhat gentler over time, the scars on his heart remained, and he firmly held the belief that no healers or shinobi in existence possessed the power to heal them. Hovering in the air for a few more minutes, he eventually settled on the edge of the cliff, this time more cautious about his actions than before. So how should I resume my training? He pondered over available possibilities. He could follow Iro Sennin's advice and begin training himself to gain control over Kyuubi's chakra, but it was no easy task. Unlike in the past, when he had people to help manage his overwhelming chakra, there was currently no one able to fulfill that role. If he were to go berserk, there would be no one capable of halting the savage dance of carnage. "I could use Kaka-sensei's method," he whispered, recalling how Kakashi had taught him the Rasen Shuriken technique with the assistance of shadow clones. Although the shadow clones were taxing on his body, they were incredibly effective. They had the potential to help him in making extraordinary progress within a matter of months, however, they shared the same drawback as the previous method. Kyuubi, the sly fox, would no doubt attempt to exploit his weakened state after using so many clones. "I can reduce the risk by summoning fewer clones," he whispered, smiling at the clever idea. Although not as fast as the first two methods, this approach was still better than the alternative of losing control and letting Yamato track him through the seal on his hand. "Alright," he stood up from the ground, gently dusting off his pants to rid them of any dirt. "From tomorrow, I will start training and this time, I will surpass Iro Sennin," he chuckled, imagining the jealous expression on that pervert's face. "Let's return to the girls. They must be panicking without my presence," his smile broadened at the thought of the mischievous duo. Now that he could think clearly, he couldn't help but acknowledge the striking resemblance between the two of them and himself. Free and carefree, wandering through a world filled with cruel individuals, with no one to turn to. "I will stand by them until they find a way to return to their home," and he truly meant it. He had made a solemn pledge to Akeno, and his reputation for being true to his word was widely recognized, even when faced with death itself. As he was about to leave, his eyes were drawn to an unusual sight hidden deep within the distant mountain peaks. A majestic castle, perched atop three towering mountains and surrounded by a verdant forested valley. It was a spectacular sight, one that made him curious. Should I visit the place? He wondered, but ultimately chose to save it for another day. Mysteries could wait, but those girls couldn't. Ooh. Riaz gently pressed her hands against her boobs and began to examine them closely. "Everything seems fine to me. How about you?" she whispered, casting a quick glance at her friend. "Same," Akeno replied, calmly fondling her own bare breast. "They appear perfectly normal to me," she added as she gave them one hard squeeze. "Then why did he run away?" The Gremory heiress frowned. Akeno fell into a momentary silence, deep in consideration of her friend's question. After a few more seconds of thought, a look of panic swept over her stunning visage. What if he is gay? She didn't want to consider it, but it was a possibility. He can't possibly be gay. He absolutely has to be straight. Yeah, if he turns out to be gay, then everything will fall apart for me, Riaz. Riaz was visibly taken aback by her friend's statement. "Why?" she inquired. "I have already made a deal to have babies with him." "Are you serious?" Yeah, let's just hope he likes girls. A familiar voice interrupted the conversation between the two girls. I'm not gay and please cover yourselves. Okay. Also, your offer to have babies was rejected immediately, Akeno. Oh. In the dark cave, the only sound that could be heard was the constant dripping of water, echoing from a mysterious source in the distance. To the unaided eye, there appeared to be nothing to observe or appreciate besides the thick and still darkness. Black surrounded everything, engulfing the surroundings. Amidst the darkness, a solitary orb of crimson emanated a flickering and broken glow as it scrutinized the night. Obito, you should stop worrying about it now, a menacing voice, enveloped in the wicked aura of deceit and slyness, echoed through the dimly lit chamber as the glow of the red eye faded into the shadows. I'm not worried, Zetsu, the owner of the eye finally spoke, his voice filled with pure malice and a hint of annoyance. I'm just thinking about the ways I can take down that blue-haired apostate, Obito whispered, vividly remembering the words of that accursed woman. They were bitterly annoying, and he would even go so far as to dub them disastrous for their plan. I don't mourn the deaths of my friends. To me, both of them departed with heroic deaths, and that is ultimately what matters. We are shinobis, Madara, and we are destined to die in one way or another. If I cannot endure the passing of others, then I have no right to claim the title of a shinobi. His lone red eye snapped open once more as a surge of chakra erupted from his body, leaving behind a wake of searing devastation. She has ruined our plans, her only punishment is death. Clenching his hand, he picked up the mask from the rock beside him and positioned it on his face. Why didn't you kill her that day? It would have been effortless, Zetsu inquired with amusement, his white side gleaming, as a flicker of distress crossed their companion's face. The boy appeared troubled, and it was evident that something unusual was occupying his thoughts. He trailed off, momentarily speechless. Why hadn't he killed her? Was it because she was useless to their plan, or because of her audacious statements? He didn't know because, at that moment, he decided to let her live and suffer in this cursed world. I will not kill her, he whispered. Suddenly, his head snapped towards the shadowy corner of the room. There, he saw the motionless form of Sasuke Uchiha lying lifeless on the ground. He will. The red eye began spinning ominously. He was the ultimate puppet for the impending war. This boy would give them everything they desired. Power, support, and above all, the Rinnegan he was willing to dedicate himself to these causes for as long as necessary. And when the time comes, he, like all others, would gladly be sacrificed to pave the way for a new world. A world where he could finally see her alive, smiling, and dancing in the endless green meadows. Zetsu smirked. Do you really think he can do that? He asked, hoping for a plausible explanation from his ally. His body is rejecting the Mokuton, he exclaimed, but his words fell on deaf ears as they failed to impact the man in front of him. Yet, to him, they remained undeniably significant. There was no denying it, Sasuke was indeed the vessel of Indral Satsuki this time. The pungent chakra was unmistakable, but why then was he rejecting the Mokuton? As far as he knew, Indra and his chakra would seize any opportunity to secure victory over his brother. So, his rejection of Mokuton was a little strange. I don't care as long as we obtain the Rinnegan. That's all that matters to me, Obito whispered, his wandering eye stealing yet another glance at the boy. Do we still have Itachi's eyes? This question prompted Zetsu to vanish into the ground, only to reappear moments later holding a peculiar glass object. The transparent box was filled with green liquid, and in the center of the eerie fluid lay two powerful eyes. Sasuke is fully prepared for the transplant procedure. I have successfully removed his Rinnegan, and now he can undoubtedly receive his brother's eyes. Playfully toying with the container in his hand, White Zetsu chuckled at the Uchiha. Obito gazed at the eyes for a moment before nodding decisively. Start the procedure immediately. I have waited for far too long, he stated firmly, leaving no room for doubt. From the moment Obito learned of Nagato's death and the disappearance of the Rinnegan, he realized their plan had been severely hindered and would be postponed indefinitely. Due to the incompetent actions of that self-proclaimed god, everything had to come to a halt, from the mission to send Sasuke to capture the Hachibi, to the preparations for Kisame's role. Every hope he had was lost. He watched as his dream was shattered right before his eyes, all because of someone else's incompetence. But then, Zetsu told him something very intriguing. This stupid boy carried the same chakra as his mentor, a potent and powerful chakra capable of attaining the ultimate power of Rikiden Sennin with the assistance of Hashirama's cells. After conducting numerous experiments, they have finally achieved their goal. A new pair of Rinnegan. With the power of these eyes in their hands, they could finally achieve their ultimate goal of changing the world. Zetsu, the strange plant man, abruptly halted his stride. Tell him that he can only kill Dansum after capturing the Hachibi and killing Konan. This will be the ultimate test of his abilities. With that command, Obito vanished into the vortex of his eye. Of course, fool Zetsu smirked. The Uchihas are just so gullible, he chuckled sinisterly, reminiscing about the occasions he had successfully deceived Indra and his foolish successors. No matter how intelligent they believed themselves to be, their emotions obstructed their ability to discern his deceitful and manipulative nature. Curse of hatred. Ha. Zetsu chuckled with amusement. This apparent curse is nothing more than a ridiculous excuse to partake in absurd behavior without consequences. His laughter echoed throughout the room once again. Uo. Haju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A sense of enthusiasm filled him as his eyes swept across the vast grassland, teeming with his mirror images. He had spent the entire night pondering what to study and ultimately arrived at a straightforward solution. Suiton. It was the only nature of chakra that could halt the scorching flames of Uchiha. His confrontation with Sasuke was inevitable, he knew that. They were destined to confront each other in a fight of life and death, so having a counterattack for his troublesome fire jutsu would be essential. Alright boys, it's time for training, let's get to it. We're on it, boss. Excitement flickered in his eyes as the clones eagerly sprinted towards the nearby water source, a shimmering pond nestled among a dense thicket of trees and bushes. Do your best. He giggled to himself, then shouted at the clones. It had been a long time since he had felt this way. The thrill of learning something new on his own had long been forgotten, but now it had returned, and he couldn't help but acknowledge that this was what made him Naruto Uzumaki. The boy who had the ability to accomplish the unimaginable on his own. He didn't require the presence of others in his life, as long as he was bestowed with the blessings of his loved ones. With them with himself, he would grow into a force to be reckoned with for the sake of the people who had sacrificed their lives for him. When a person has something important that they want to protect, that's when they can truly become strong. Blue eyes glistened with a newfound determination. I have countless promises to keep, and I'll not die until I fulfill them all, he declared. Carefully unbuttoning his vibrant orange and black jacket, he gently laid it on the ground. Ram Cross. Forming the famous Ram Cross seal, he grinned when bright bursts of smoke lit up the area. Alright. He exclaimed, taking the starting position for the renowned frog kata as his blue eyes turned gold. You three. He pointed at the three clones who were engrossed in conversation, discussing something dreadful, likely a spooky tale. Head to that secret area and gather information about the natural energy presence there. His clones promptly obeyed the command and disappeared in a flash of orange and black. His eyes shifted back to the rest of the clones, grinning at him eagerly, awaiting their opportunity to lay their hands on him. Attack. Startled, without any warning, they all rushed towards Naruto, who was taken aback as he realized he had enhanced this group of clones with Sage Chakra. This left him stunned, unable to react in time. You moron. The first punch landed on the gut of the boy. Why did you stop training? The blow landed on his jaw as the clone shouted out his frustration at him. We are Naruto Uzumaki, and we never stop training, you know. The powerful blow from the third opponent caused him to struggle for breath, feeling his ribs ache. That's happened, but that doesn't mean we should stop doing the things that keep us alive. The fourth was rather gentle compared to the previous ones, only brushing off his back and leaving a few minor scratches. Now look at you, being blasted away by his own shadow clones. The fifth's punch was the most powerful, and it was enough to send Naruto flying to the ground. Naruto had no idea what had just transpired. It was all a blur of agony and confusion for him. The only sensation he could feel was excruciating pain, a pain beyond imagination. Oh, he groaned, struggling to open his mouth, but his efforts proved futile in this predicament. He didn't know clones could be dangerous, but he had noticed how different they were from him and from each other. Ashwards, he mumbled through a swollen lip with his mouth partially closed. What's the matter, boss? Are you already getting old? The clone couldn't complete his insult as a ferocious punch, brimming with untamed rage, connected with his cheek, dissipating him into a cloud of smoke. The other clones immediately straightened up as a highly enthusiastic Naruto emerged from the haze. The sinister grin on his face was truly frightening. Let's fight, his words were enough to send shivers down the clones' spines as they trembled in fear. I am not old, he declared to the first clone as it dissipated into a whirlwind of air and smoke. I can still fight. The second was fortunate enough to evade the initial attack, but was then pushed into the path of the natural energy. Needless to say, he couldn't even handle the touch of the invisible force. The remaining clones, who were watching the brutal beatdown of their kin, shivered, their fear palpable on their sweaty faces. The sight before them was a powerful display of their boss's true capabilities when pushed to his limits. He was undeniably merciless when he needed to be. The third clone took a step back as his boss's electric golden eyes landed on him. It was his turn next. I will surpass that pervert, and the clone was not mistaken. With incredible speed, Naruto flickered in front of him and unleashed a barrage of unforgiving powerful punches. The other two duplicates were so terrified that they resorted to punching themselves, desperately hoping that one would miraculously disappear or vice versa. Punch harder. One clone bellowed at his doppelganger. "I'm try." His words were drowned out by the dense haze of smoke. The last remaining one gulped, scanning his surroundings nervously, aware of the imminent end. He wasn't surprised when a grinning Naruto appeared from the smoke and placed his hand on his cheek, albeit a little too forcefully. Naruto pouted. "Damn it, those bastards. They could have hit me more gently, HMPH." His eyes scurried away from the remnants of destruction he had caused and began to analyze the other clones who were desperately attempting to walk on water as fast as possible. He still marveled at how such a simple jutsu like cage bunshin could yield such remarkable outcomes. It was a multi-purpose jutsu, one which he could utilize to learn amazing things in a matter of minutes and also could be used to hide his insecurities. Loneliness, he whispered, looking down at the ground. It was a very familiar word for him. He had known its meaning for years now, and there was no denying that it was an agonizing emotion. It hurts the most, he reflected with a heavy heart. Oh, his train of thoughts was interrupted by a sudden rush of memories that invaded his mind. The memories were nothing significant, just a few faint illustrations of his clone's first attempt at water walking exercise. The clones are performing well, he smiled. As he glanced up at the sky with squinted eyes, he noticed that the sun was already in the middle, indicating that it was already past noon. I have to arrange my house too. His words suddenly reminded him of something he had forgotten amidst the training. Damn. I need to help the girls as well. With determination, he swiftly turned and made his way towards the beautiful place that was now his home. A place he would defend with all his strength and willpower. This time, I will not fail. Ooh-oh. Naruto was left in awe at the mesmerizing sight before him. He could hardly believe his own eyes as numerous objects effortlessly floated through the air, as light as a speck of dust or a feather. He couldn't understand how it was possible without the Rinnegan. It was surreal to see that the person behind this was none other than his companion, Rias. Just like the objects, the girl in question was also soaring high in the air with the help of her beautiful wings. Amazing, he uttered a single yet powerful word to convey his awe at the impressive display of skill. There was absolutely no one, and he meant absolutely no one, who could do what the girl in front of him was doing at this very moment with such effortless grace. Rias blinked in surprise upon hearing Naruto's voice. She quickly dispelled the magical seal and turned to meet his gaze, only to be captivated by what she saw in his eyes. Admiration and amazement, two emotions she had seldom seen combined in someone's gaze before. The male demons often gazed at her with desire, while the female ones were envious of her beauty. The select few humans who had witnessed her true form were primarily filled with desire, while others remained uncertain. So, it was refreshing to see someone who hardly feared her magic and actually admired it without any hint of perversion. "Did you like it?" she asked, hovering in midair with her wings, savoring the incredible feeling for a few more moments. "Of course," came the stunned reply from Naruto. "Flying is so much fun, you know." In an instant, the admiration evaporated and jealousy, accompanied by a subtle pout, took over. The devil girl giggled mischievously. "Oh, come on, please don't be so sad," she said sympathetically as she gracefully descended from the sky and landed beside the boy. Here she held out her hands. "Hold me, I will let you ride me." She may have spoken carelessly, but as the true meaning of her words finally dawned on her, her face immediately flushed with embarrassment. Embarrassment or excitement? She wasn't sure. Although Naruto sensed the internal struggle the girl was facing, he remained composed and reached out to hold her hands. They were cold for some reason, but it didn't bother him. In just a few minutes, he was about to have the experience of a lifetime. "Rias," he whispered to the girl who appeared lost in her own thoughts. His words startled her back to reality. "What do you?" She was cut off again when she realized that her hands were now held by the boy. "Ride me." Precarious thoughts besieged her mind once more, but this time, they had little to no effect on her. Instead, an exciting idea sprang into her mind. "Pick me up," she whispered, smiling innocently at the bewildered boy. She had witnessed Akeno laughing and reveling in his embrace, so by their rules, it was now her turn, and she would ensure that she savored every moment of it. Arms? No, she wanted something different. Behind, and there was no place better than his back where she could reveal her devilish features to him. Leaping relentlessly for a few seconds, she eventually positioned herself on his back, eliciting a slight groan in the process. "I cannot carry you, so you must cling onto me," she instructed. With a single utterance, a pair of elegant obsidian wings burst forth from her back, and in a mere instant, they soared into the boundless blue skies above. Naruto remained silent for a while at the beginning, completely absorbed by the captivating view before him. Everything appeared small and beautiful. The mountains, rivers, and trees below all resembled a piece of a magnificent painting, whose creator remained unknown. "Whoa," he gasped as they took a sharp turn to the right, narrowly avoiding the flocks of birds swirling through the sky in a riot of colors. The surreal experience only fueled his determination to delve deeper into mastering the powers of the Rinnegan. Isn't it beautiful? Riaz whispered in a gentle tone, savoring the frequent changes of his expression. He glanced over his shoulder and nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. I have always wanted to fly high in the sky. Her grip tightened around his body, but the boy was too preoccupied to notice. In that fleeting moment, all she could manage was a soft breathless "oh." She couldn't help but notice that something strange was happening to her. His captivating smile, joyful attitude, and bright blonde hair dancing in the wind were beginning to have an unfamiliar effect on her. They were stirring up an emotion that she had vowed to conceal from the world. Attraction, whether she liked it or not, she was finding herself increasingly intrigued by a human. No. She told herself. There was no way she could be entertaining such thoughts about a human like him. Can you take me to Akeno? His words snapped her out of the trance. Just like that, the moment shattered. She averted her gaze from him, taking a moment to calm her wild mind and heart. Sure, she answered, promptly flapping her wings to execute a sharp dive toward the ground. During the descent, her hands unconsciously tightened their grip on him, as if she were unwilling to let him go. "Oh. Thank you, Riaz," said Naruto as they landed in front of Akeno's shrine. "You have been a great help." "No problem, Naruto," Riaz said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, something that Naruto noticed instantly. "Hey Riaz, is everything alright?" Naruto asked with a concerned tone. He had noticed that during the descent, Riaz held him tighter than she had during the flight. No. Absolutely nothing." Riaz exclaimed, her response escaping a little too hastily as she vigorously shook her head. Revealing her inner struggle to Naruto was out of the question. She was determined to face this challenge on her own. "I just suddenly remembered that I need to complete some unfinished cleaning tasks." Naruto instantly knew that she was lying. The slight twitching of the skin beneath her eyelids and the subtle curling of her fingers may have gone unnoticed by a casual observer, but not by Naruto, an adept ninja. However, he realized that she did not want to talk about the matter, so he decided not to trouble his new acquaintance. "Oh, I apologize. I won't take up any more of your afternoon," Naruto said, flashing Riaz a charming grin as he tilted his head, bearing a striking resemblance to a fox with his eyes closed. Riaz felt her face flush as she caught sight of Naruto's adorable expression. She silently thanked her lucky stars that Naruto had his eyes closed, preventing him from seeing her blushing cheeks. The feelings she experienced during the flight came rushing back, compelling her to step forward and embrace him. With considerable effort, she pushed back her feelings and managed to speak in her normal tone of voice, suppressing the joyful squeal she desperately wanted to release. "I'll see you later, then." Riaz waved goodbye to Naruto as his eyelids opened and she quickly spread her wings, taking off into the sky with a graceful leap. Naruto watched her depart, a small smile playing on his lips. He couldn't help but notice how Riaz blushed when he flashed his trademark foxy grin. Deep down, he felt a sense of pride in the fact that even the most skilled pervert couldn't make a woman blush like he could. It appeared that he was already surpassing him. Realizing that he could not afford to waste any more time, he quickly turned around and came to a halt in front of the shrine. The shrine was nothing out of the ordinary, it resembled Naka's shrine back in Konoha. Naruto noticed only two distinct features as he approached. The pair of sakura trees gracefully adorning each side of the archway and the elegant fence gracefully encasing the shrine. The staircase looked cleaner and shorter, and the stone sculptures had more defined features compared to those outside the Naka shrine. Although Naruto had seen several similar buildings before, there was something about this one that made him come to a halt and marvel at the sight. "Oh, Naruto." A female voice jolted him back to reality. He turned his gaze towards the shrine's entrance, where Akeno stood donning a pristine white Miko attire adorned with delicate red lace. She was holding a broom and appeared to be sweeping the floor, but her red dress showed no signs of dirt or dust. "How are you today?" "Nothing much, just trying to learn something new." "And you?" Naruto replied with a small smile as he ascended the stairs leading up to the shrine. "I feel much better now that you're here," Akeno chirped joyfully, setting her broom aside and stepping aside slightly to make way for Naruto. "How about I give you a tour of this place?" That sounds fantastic." Naruto exclaimed, giving her the same charming smile he had flashed at Riaz. "I must confess, the outfit really suits you. It enhances your beauty even more than before," he complimented, gazing at the attire with great interest. There was something troubling his mind because all he could think about at that moment was her wearing that outfit loosely on her figure. Akeno's blushing was much more noticeable than Ria's. She raised a sleeve to conceal her flushed face and playfully exclaimed, "Oh my, Naruto-san. Are you flirting with little Almi?" Only the closed eyelids of her face were visible, but they seemed to crease with delight, mirroring Kakashi's signature smile. No. Naruto hastily exclaimed, waving his hands around frantically. "I was just trying to give you a compliment, that's all. I wasn't making any advances." Akeno felt a momentary pang of disappointment hearing her handsome dismiss her intentions, but quickly pushed those emotions aside. She lowered her sleeve, revealing the smile on her face as she said, well, no need to be so flustered. Please, come in and let me give you that tour. With a mischievous twinkle in her eyes, she giggled and motioned for Naruto to follow with a playful smirk on her lips. Naruto determinedly ignored the giggling girl beside him. Giggling should be outlawed. He thought furiously to himself with a mental huff. However, his petulant thoughts were soon forgotten as Akeno led him inside the shrine. The interior of the shrine presented a stunning and well-organized courtyard, with neatly lined small bushes along the path and patches of vibrant green grass situated behind them. The courtyard was divided into 4 distinct sections, each one separated by a path, including the main entrance, which formed a cross shape. In the center of each section, there stood a magnificent tree bearing luscious fruit. Peaches adorned the top left, apples graced the top right, oranges adorned the bottom left, and plums decorated the bottom right. At the convergence of the 4 paths, a solitary, medium-sized fountain gushed forth with impeccably clear water. Joyful chirping could also be heard coming from the fountain, which seemed to serve as a birdbath as well. Upon closer inspection, one could observe a few glowing runes along the base of the fountain, which controlled the water and the circulation. Akeno then guided Naruto through the various rooms, from the dining room to the library and the bedrooms. However, she made a special point of emphasizing her own bedroom and repeatedly gave Naruto suggestive looks, which he pointedly ignored. Wow, Naruto breathed in amazement as they returned to the courtyard and settled on a bench. He reclined, allowing himself to relax as he listened to the melodious chirping of the birds and observed several of them gracefully gliding in and out of the gushing fountain. Did you create all of this by yourself? Of course not. Akeno answered with an amused smile on her face. I found all of this already here, I just tidied everything up. Even so, this is truly amazing. Naruto exclaimed, sitting up and gesturing toward the courtyard and the scenery. Suddenly, a small red bird flew by and landed on Naruto's outstretched hand, causing him to freeze and slowly pull back his arm. What an adorable little creature, Naruto thought to himself as he tenderly caressed the bird, enjoying the gentle nuzzling of its petite head against his hand. He grew contemplative as he started thinking this is what Jiraiya wanted, he thought as he continued to stroke the bird's head. A world of peace and tranquility. A place where harmony reigns and all can live without fear. Akeno noticed Naruto falling silent and turned her head to ask what was wrong, but decided against it when she saw the pure smile on his face. To her, that smile was something she felt she could gaze upon for eternity. It wasn't like the artificial smile she wore as a facade, a mere disguise. This smile was genuine, a reflection of his pure bliss. Her heart began to race as she gazed at him, wanting to witness his smile more frequently. Her gaze drifted from his visage to the delicate crimson bird perched on his lap. Her thoughts took a downturn as she gazed upon the chirping bird. She knew that Riaz also desired her handsome, and the thought of him leaving her was utterly terrifying. Would she once again be overshadowed? Would she be the second choice? Would he abandon her, just like her despicable father did? Her somber thoughts were interrupted by a comical outburst of anger that shattered the peaceful atmosphere. When she glanced at Naruto, she burst into a fit of laughter. There was a patch of bird droppings on Naruto's golden hair. Naruto was livid. He was having a great time when, out of nowhere, a member of the bird's family decided that it was the perfect moment to answer nature's call right above him. However, his anger quickly faded away as he heard the joyful laughter of Akeno. Never before had he experienced such a delightful sound. In that very moment, he resolved to do whatever it took to make Akeno laugh more, eager to revel in the sheer beauty of her angelic laughter. Akeno? Naruto asked, feeling a bit awkward after the laughter subsided. Is there a place where I can wash this off? Of course, Akeno said, giggling from time to time. Follow me. Uo. Naruto sat in a small garden next to the library, focusing his chakra as he skillfully carved into a stone. Beside him lay 2 other blank stones and a stack of processed and painted wood, all ready to be assembled. Akeno had led him to her personal bathroom, which made him feel rather uncomfortable. Her suggestive actions and teasing tone of voice only made things worse. What are you up to, Naruto? The woman that Naruto had been thinking about spoke from behind him. Naruto halted his carving, gazing back to find Akeno wearing the same attire as earlier today. With a hint of sorrow in his voice, Naruto explained, I am constructing a memorial for the people who were dearest to my heart. He motioned towards the pile, his expression reflecting melancholy. Forgive me, I should have asked for your permission before arriving here. Oh, it's not a problem at all. Akeno said, dismissing Naruto's concern. You are welcome to visit here anytime. She glanced at the stack of wood. Would you like some assistance in assembling it? That would be wonderful. Thank you, Naruto exclaimed, overwhelmed with gratitude for the generous offer of assistance. With his limited knowledge of crafting memorials, he felt anxious about the possibility of making a mistake that could diminish the significance of the tribute. Naruto and Akeno worked in a peaceful silence, diligently constructing the memorials based on a sketch that Naruto had meticulously designed during the previous nights. After a few hours, the sky started to turn orange as the sun began to sink lower. Standing up, Naruto walked over to the base of the sakura tree and placed the final memorial there. As he turned around, Akeno spoke up from behind him. "I leave you alone now, Naruto. Thank you for letting me help you." No. I should be the one thanking you," Naruto said, turning around to face her. "However, if it's not too much trouble, do you happen to have any incense sticks nearby?" "Of course, silly. This is a shrine, in case you didn't notice," Akeno giggled into her sleeve as Naruto let out a small groan at the realization. "I'll go get some for you." As Akeno departed, Naruto shifted his gaze towards the memorials, his voice filled with solemnity. "Hey Bach-an, Iro-sennin and Hinata. It's been quite a while since our last conversation, hasn't it? I apologize for not talking earlier, but things kept getting in the way." He wondered. "Anyway, now that I am here, I want to express." As he continued to speak, tears welled up in his eyes and cascaded down his cheeks, gradually soaking the vibrant verdant grass below. "Can you believe it? Those two girls, Rias and Akeno, claimed to be devils. Devils of all things. And here I was, thinking that such creatures were mere legends and figments of imagination." Naruto chuckled, a tiny glimmer of amusement appearing on his tear-streaked face. "You would love to see them, Iro-sennin. They both have the biggest boobs I've ever seen, big enough to give Bach-an a run for her money, I think." His lips quirked up in a small smile. "You would probably faint and die of blood loss if you ever saw them." Engrossed in conversation, he didn't even realize it was nighttime until the fireflies started flying up from the grass. Gazing up at the moonlit sky, his heart sank and his frame began to shake slightly as his emotions threatened to consume him once more. "I apologize, I'm sorry that I couldn't be there to protect all of you, sorry that I couldn't fulfill my promise to you, Bach-an, that I couldn't reciprocate your love, Hinata." He couldn't hold back his trembling sobs as he whispered, "I swear, Iro-sennin. I vow with all my heart and soul to make your dream come true. I will bring peace to this world and carry on your legacy." With unwavering resolve burning in his eyes, he raised his right hand towards the heavens and let his voice unleash, intensifying into a resounding roar. "I will succeed, or I will die trying. I will not fail you again." Hearing two sniffles from behind him, he tensed and whipped his body around and saw both Rias and Akeno standing there with tears in their eyes. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of embarrassment, he realized that those two must have heard at least half of, if not all of his speech. Although he knew deep down that the girls wouldn't think any less of him for this, a nagging doubt in his mind whispered that they might abandon him in the aftermath. That they would turn their backs on him and leave him alone again. Akeno, fully aware of Naruto's apprehensions, spoke in a sincere tone without any trace of her usual teasing playfulness. "Losing family and friends is never easy. We don't think any less of you for expressing your emotions." Embracing him, she was inwardly glad that Naruto didn't pull away. "Just know that if you ever need someone to talk to, my doors are always open." She gently let go of him from the hug and offered him a smile, tinged with sadness, yet providing comfort. Moving forward, Rias followed Akeno's lead and addressed Naruto with kindness. "Akeno is absolutely correct. We will never see you as weak just because you express your sorrow over losing loved ones. Although I haven't personally gone through such a loss, I promise to give you my unwavering support, Naruto." As she released the blonde, a gust of wind swept through, scattering sakura petals from the tree. The petals swirled in the wind, some gently landing on the trio, others floating into the pond near the memorial, and a few gracefully adorning the memorial and the grass. Naruto felt a powerful wave of emotions consuming him. Here were two girls that he had barely known for a month, yet they were both so willing to help him in his time of despair. He couldn't help but deeply admire the scene before him. The two beautiful girls illuminated by the fireflies, bathed in the moonlight from the clear sky, with cherry blossom petals dancing around them. It was truly a scene he longed to remain in forever. His heart swelled with an unexplainable emotion as he nodded with gratitude, speechless. Sensing Naruto's mood, Rias and Akeno both handed him a small packet of incense sticks and gave him one final reassuring smile as they turned around, leaving Naruto alone in the garden. His voice dropped to a whisper again as they walked away. "How will I succeed without your wisdom here to guide me, Bach-an?" He lit the incense sticks with a spark of chakra and placed 3 in each of the 3 small pots on the memorials. "I wish there was someone as wise as you here to guide me," he muttered, offering a small prayer as he turned around and started walking away, uncertain about what the future would bring. If he had stayed just a moment longer, he would have witnessed a subtle glimmer of light illuminating the memorials. Not only that, but he would have noticed how the light quickly ascended into the sky, only to vanish with a gentle burst. Surrounded by the pungent stench of decaying flesh and the chaotic dance of roaring flames, she stood alone. She could still vividly remember everything, to the extent that she could swear she was witnessing it all over again. The helpless cries, tearful faces, and burning skin. Her mind could never erase that event from her memory. They were pure, just like her and her countless brothers and sisters. So, why were they brutally killed? Why did they have to endure such a horrific fate? As far as she could recall, love was never a sin. It never was, it still isn't, and hopefully, it will never be. Then why were they murdered? They simply loved each other, with pure and innocent feelings. Yet the so-called bearer of justice showed them no mercy. Her little brother, her innocent and lovely brother, fell from the skies because of one small mistake. He gave his heart to another innocent being. She never cared about who she was, for her, she was her little brother's whole world, and thus she embraced her without hesitation. However, those high up in the sky perceived their love as treacherous. In a single day, she lost both of them. Her little brother and his wife. They were burned in front of her eyes, crying and begging for mercy, but no one came to their aid. To others, they may have been seen as a fallen angel and succubus, but to her, they were everything. She remembered how she pleaded with the being who was the cause of it all, but the embodiment of justice ignored her pleas and watched everything unfold with gleeful eyes. Rage. It was the first time she experienced such emotion coursing through her veins, and she couldn't deny its astonishing power. It was as if she had stumbled upon the long-awaited solution to all of her questions. Her anger fueled her every action. Every obstacle that dared to stand in her way was destroyed by the ferocity of her rage. One by one, without hesitation, she killed them all, in hope to confront the ultimate monster that was cause of their deaths. Satisfaction. She finally found a semblance of satisfaction. The burning rage that had fueled her during the toughest moments in the past gradually subsided once she witnessed the battered face of that man. A sense of satisfaction washed over her as the weight of reality sank into her heart, knowing that she had finally achieved justice for her brother. Sadness. The fleeting sense of satisfaction quickly vanished, leaving her consumed by overwhelming feelings of isolation and sorrow. After those deaths, there seemed to be no purpose for her continuous existence. Her father, brother, and sister were all dead, and she felt as if a part of her had died alongside them. Imitation. In order to overcome the unbearable sadness, she finally decided to relinquish herself in an act. She completely let go of her own identity, dedicating her heart and mind to embody that of her little brother. Though her body still bore the scars of her past, her inner thoughts and emotions now mirrored the pure innocence of her beloved sibling. Gabriel, Azazel's soft voice snapped her out of her reverie. As she glanced around the graveyard, she became aware that it was dawn already and that she had allowed herself to become lost in the memories of that fateful day once more. It had been countless millennia since that tragic event unfolded, yet she still couldn't forget about it. Opening her eyes, she delicately wiped away the tears that filled them. "Brother," she whispered. The dead tone of his sister damaged his heart in ways he couldn't explain. Since that fateful day, he had never witnessed her laughter or a genuine smile grace her face. It seemed as if she were playing a role, living a fictional existence for the sake of a place called heaven. A place teeming with hypocrites, a place that cruelly snatched away his beloved innocent sister from his grasp. "You have to move on, Gabriel. If he was alive, he would have never wanted to see you cry like this." The ground felt cold and hard as he slowly sat down beside his sister, who was still crying inconsolably. "But I miss them both so much. They were my everything." Another wave of tears shook her body as bittersweet memories of her brother began to play in her mind. "Hey Mimi. Give me some space." The endearing voice of her younger brother rang in her ears. "You don't need to be afraid of those bullies, sis. I'll always be here to protect you." Her body quivered with emotions. "Hey, look over here." Without hesitating, she immediately turned her head towards the grave. She couldn't help but gasp in surprise when she saw a charming blonde boy sitting comfortably under the shade of a tree. His smile instantly captivated her, causing her lips to curl up uncontrollably. "Why are you crying?" he asked her. "I don't know." Her smile broadened when the boy blinked at her, a sign of his confusion at her response. "You haven't changed at all, sister," he murmured softly before flashing another smile. "Anyway, let me introduce you to Maria." As he finished his words, a stunning girl emerged from behind the tree. "Hello, Sister Gabriel," she whispered, her words trembling with a mix of anticipation and fear. Tears welled up in her eyes once again, but this time Gabriel brushed them away before they could fall. Hello, Maria," her voice broke with the weight of sadness and regret consuming her. The girl standing before her was so innocent that even a blind person could tell she posed hardly any threat. Her eyes returned to the boy, who was anxiously trying to gauge their reactions. "Maria," he said, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder, "don't worry about my sister. She may be incredibly powerful, but she will never harm you. In fact, I'm sure she will always do her best to protect you, right sister?" He cast a meaningful glance at her. Why? Gabriel looked away from the duo. Each passing second made it increasingly difficult. The looks of adoration and respect in their eyes were tormenting her from within. Oi meanie, at least answer me ahhhh. Her eyes snapped open, capturing the fearful screams of the boy and girl that reached her ears. With clenched hands, she trembled violently. Don't turn your gaze, she whispered under her breath. She didn't want to look in that direction anymore, for fate had already inflicted upon her more than enough suffering. Sister Gabriel. I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. Please help. However, despite her best efforts, she found herself unable to resist and her eyes involuntarily shifted in their direction. No, she whispered, overwhelmed by guilt and anguish as she witnessed the scene before her. The boy and the girl were trembling and crying in the midst of the fiery storm and holy light. Their weak voices were pleading with the people outside, doing their best to cling to each other amid the punishment. Suffering for a few more seconds, they both finally looked at her, causing her to gasp. Their eyes, which were so full of life just moments ago, were now utterly vacant. There was nothing in them, not even resentment for her. Sister. Tears finally fell from her eyes as they both smiled at her and disappeared into the air, leaving behind a trail of delicate petals that gently drifted down onto their graves. She was brought out of her dream by a chilling touch on her shoulder. Gabriel, her brother's sadness and pain were evident in his voice. Brother, she said, turning to his side and instinctively clutching his arm. Her tears flowed even more intensely. Her brother Azazel was the one person in this world who could truly understand her anguish. Why didn't I fall as well? Her sobs grew louder. Amidst the tears, Gabriel felt a surge of pure rage, consumed by thoughts of what had transpired. Her furious anger could rival that of Satan himself, a wrath so powerful that it could instantly cast any other angel into darkness. Protectors of the innocent, she fumed in her thoughts. What a group of sanctimonious nonsense. Those hypocritical idiots do absolutely nothing but appear wise and beautiful. Azazel was left speechless for a moment. The question posed by his sister was one that had plagued his mind ever since he had discovered her darkest secret. If the heavenly system never committed any errors, then why had Gabriel not been punished for carrying out the execution of that murderer? There was no denying it. On that critical day, she committed an unpardonable sin. Yet, nothing happened to her. When he found out about it from her, he was both pleased and angry. Pleased because his innocent and kind sister was spared from living a cruel life as a fallen angel, while angry because the system that pardoned her from punishment never showed mercy to other innocent angels. Thousands, and he meant thousands, of angels were exiled from the heavens due to a minor mistake. However, it was truly astonishing that one of the most powerful and significant angels who eliminated another important angel managed to escape any form of punishment whatsoever. I don't know, Gabriel. I've never really understood why that system is so biased at times, he finally said, his face reflecting his immense misery. Gabriel, still clinging to his arm for dear life, lowered her head in sadness as the tears dried on her soft cheeks, leaving trails behind. This world isn't for me, brother, she spoke faintly about her suffering. I cannot have what I desire here. I cannot have them back, and you cannot have a family. It pained her deeply to remind her brother of his disability. However, no matter their efforts, they could not change the harsh truth. Azazel turned away as tears welled up in his own eyes. His sister's words once again brought to mind something he could never possess, something for which he had sacrificed his entire existence. It was the very reason he had been cast out from heaven, stolen from him during the war. The desire to have a child of my own. It began with a single tear, but soon his anguish overflowed in a torrent of emotion. Now you don't start crying too, brother. But I accepted every punishment for it, Gabriel, and in the end, I couldn't even have it. Gabriel wiped away her own tears first. You have that boy Volley right, she whispered. Azazel shook his head slowly, a sad smile on his face. He only sees me as a stepping stone. To him, I'm nothing more than a hindrance, I think, he said, each word accompanied by a fresh tear. Oh, she thought sadly. As long as we exist in this world, suffering seems inevitable, brother. Heaven will constantly remind me of what I've lost, while the scars of war will haunt you for eternity. Tenderly plucking two small yellow flowers from the grass-covered soil, she placed them gently on the graves of her loved ones. Michael must be searching for me now, she murmured, and then rose from the cold ground. Goodbye, Gabriel. I hope you will visit me soon. Azazel didn't even look at her. He found it hard to show his tears to his sister. Every word she spoke was absolutely true. They both were going to suffer in this world for eternity. I hope you find someone who can make you laugh again. His heart wanted to witness her smile once more. Not the artificial one she displays to others, but a genuine, radiant smile like the one she used to wear before the untimely passing of her little brother. A small smile tugged her lips. I hope the same for you. He didn't answer because he knew her smile was fake, as it always was. Goodbye, bro. Azazel looked up suddenly as she stopped speaking. Gabriel. His eyes widened in surprise as a beam of light surrounded his sister. Concerned for her safety, he lunged forward and grabbed her hand, determined to pull her out of the light. Huh, he gasped as he realized that no matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't pull her out of the light. It was as if an invisible yet powerful force was pulling her away from him. Brother. He heard her scream, but before he could even understand what was happening, the beam pushed him away from his sister. The beams of light vanished in no time, taking the angel with them. All that remained were the colorful flowers adorning the graves of the two lovers and a shocked Azazel who couldn't utter a single word at that moment. Uo. Shinra Tensei. A powerful unseen force crashed into the earth, instantly plunging the entire region into sheer chaos. The once motionless trees and rocks were suddenly transformed into a mesmerizing spectacle as they soared through the air, accompanied by a swirling cloud of dust and debris. What was once a serene landscape transferred into a large and wide crater, an impactful reminder of the incredible power unleashed during the collision. A pair of purple eyes blinked as their owner surveyed the total destruction caused by a single push of their chakra. The sight was simultaneously awe-inspiring and terrifying. Now I understand why Nagato was so powerful, Naruto mumbled to himself, remembering the tremendous amount of destruction that the man had caused in Konoha. If such a small amount of chakra was enough to accomplish what he had just done, then he could only imagine the catastrophic power he could unleash by channeling even more chakra into these godlike eyes. Anshm Tenon. A low, murmured chant escaped his lips and much to his own amazement, the debris and smoke enveloping the area before him started amassing into a colossal sphere comprised of rocks and wood. Tabaku Tensei. He vaguely remembered the scary technique Nagato had used to bind the Kikbi. It was truly extraordinary, there was no denying it. Now, witnessing a miniature version of the technique, it became even more fascinating. It was as if he was attempting to create the technique by fusing two other dangerous abilities together. Now, onto the exciting part. Flying. A wide smile stretched across his face as he anticipated what was to come. With a flick of his fingers, he commanded the massive orb to descend into the crater. As the collision shook the ground, causing his feet to stumble, he quickly infused his chakra into them, instantly regaining his balance. Let's get going, he said, gently closing his eyes to focus on the task of levitating. It was difficult, he had little to no experience with it. Although he could levitate for a while, it was physically impossible for him to continue after that. Let's start. For a while, he meditated, channeling a small amount of chakra into his eyes at regular intervals. Bit by bit, he became aware of the remarkable transformations taking place within him. The weight of gravity began to dissolve, creating a sensation of weightlessness. Soon, his feet gracefully started gliding above the earth, ascending higher and higher. Before he knew it, he found himself soaring above the majestic trees and towering structures that surrounded him. Whoa, no matter how many times he used this power, it always amazed him how a pair of eyes could let you glide in the air without any restrictions. For him, these eyes were a key to freedom. Freedom from the limitations of the human body, freedom from the shackles of society, and, most importantly, freedom from this world itself. Up here, he could do whatever he wanted without fear of judgment from anyone. No one could touch him here. I'm free. His cry was suddenly cut short as the full force of gravity returned, crashing him harshly to the ground. Ow, ow, his groans did nothing to alleviate the excruciating pain coursing through his body. It was terrible, even worse than what he was used to enduring when he was with Sakura. Sakura. Even through the pain, a small smile tugged at his lips at the thought of the pink-haired beauty. She must be extremely concerned about him at this moment, yet sadly, he couldn't even send her a message because he knew she would stop at nothing to find him. She is a good friend, and he was serious. Despite her stubborn and sometimes foolish behavior, she always did her best to support him when he was at his lowest. Whether it was cooking for him or assisting him with moving to the outskirts of the village, she never grumbled about it. Although her cooking was bad, even worse than me, he chuckled genuinely. Just like her demeanor, her food lacked flavor and depth. I hope she is fine. Uo. Naruto was unsure of his emotions. Should he take pride in mastering an element in just 1 week, or should he feel ashamed for resorting to a trick to accomplish it? The shadow clones were not something that one could use as adeptly as him without even feeling tired. It was solely due to his immense chakra reserves that he was able to accomplish this incredible feat. What if he had not possessed these reserves? Would he have been capable of doing anything at all? He frowned, for the answer was as clear as the sky above. No. Without his reserves, he was truly powerless. All of his jutsus required a significant amount of chakra, so without large reserves, he was nothing but a completely ineffective shinobi. In contrast, his rival was a remarkably skilled shinobi, despite having reserves as limited as a genin's. I'm powerful only because of the monster inside me, he whispered, gently rubbing the seal on his abdomen as he spoke. There was no denying it, the monster inside him was the very reason he was still alive. "I should be ashamed of myself," he muttered, casting his eyes down as he clenched his hands in frustration. "Ha!" His entire body tensed as a very familiar voice echoed in his mind. "Pathetic." Like a precisely sharpened needle, the monster's single word impaled his heart with its arrogance. Naruto collapsed onto the ground, overwhelmed by the pungent chakra of the bitch coursing through his veins. Though he had felt the effects of this chakra in the past, this time it seemed to inflict an even greater suffering upon him. Ahhh. His agonized screams echoed throughout the entire area. Birds and insects frantically flitted back and forth between the trees and small bushes, seeking shelter from the perceived threat. "Do you truly believe that Uchiha's skill stemmed solely from his raw talent?" The fox's deep and sonorous voice brought him back to his senses. His body, which was burning ferociously just a second ago, suddenly went as cold as ice. Huh? He blinked at the puzzling question. Could it be that Sasuke wasn't talented, despite his hard training? No, an Uchiha cannot be skilled from the start. It's their red eyes that make them feel superior to others, you ignorant fool. The fox's deep resentment towards the entire clan was clearly evident in its tone. What do you mean? The burning sensation returned, more vicious than ever. Sharingan. Naruto winced at the surge of hatred that flooded his mind at the mention of those eyes. You're mistaken if you believe that you're inferior to that Uchiha in terms of talent, simply because you possess a larger chakra reserve and he doesn't. Let me ask you, Uzumaki, have you ever seen a powerful Uchiha without the Sharingan? The monster's inquiry rendered him utterly speechless. No, he mumbled, his mind still grappling with the concept of a fearful Uchiha without the Sharingan. You now have your answer, Uzumaki. Never again should you dare to compare yourself to an Uchiha. If there's someone I despise more than a weak-willed vessel, it's an Uchiha. With those words, the intense burning subsided. Naruto gasped. What he fell to the ground. The power of the fox was extremely effective. Throughout their entire conversation, there was not a single moment when he was free from the allure of the Biju. It felt as though the monster was using spells to capture his attention. Why did you suddenly start talking to me? Naruto whispered quietly, hoping for the fox to respond once more. Unfortunately, the monster didn't answer him this time. Hello, he tried again, but the result remained unchanged. Hello? Fox? Hi Ubi. Finally, after being ignored numerous times, Naruto decided to leave the fox alone. If the monster didn't want to talk, then he wouldn't force it either. However, he realized that throughout their conversation, he never detected any hatred, malice, or even the faintest hint of an intention to harm him. He only felt annoyance and concern with a slight hint of fondness. He shook his head at those last two feelings, knowing that he must be wrong. He was completely convinced that the furball would never care about him, nor would it have even the slightest bit of affection for him. It detested him with the utmost disdain. I should be training right now. He screamed at himself, his frustration echoing through the air. The unexpected encounter with the fox had caught him off guard, causing him to lose his concentration on his training entirely. Yet he knew deep down that he still had much to achieve in mastering the art of flying. Okay, a smile played at his lips as his blue eyes became lost in the rippling effect of purple. Soon, he was soaring once more in the chilly air of the area. Concentrate Naruto, concentrate. His confident hums perished in his mouth as dark clouds started to form in the sky above him. Dread filled his heart. Not again. No, he whispered. Blink. It took only a moment for him to notice a person falling helplessly from the sky. From the appearance, it was a woman. Of course, she had to be a woman. His luck was always remarkable in these situations. Taking a deep breath, he outstretched his hand towards her. Anshmtenen. The result was just as anticipated. Her body, plummeting rapidly towards the ground, suddenly halted in midair. Within the next few seconds, it rotated slightly and then gracefully glided towards an impatient Naruto. His eyes widened in astonishment as he realized that he had expended an enormous amount of chakra in the technique. In an instant, the girl's body collided with his. Gah! A sharp gasp of pain escaped his lips as the impact propelled them both through the air, covering vast distances. Naruto, filled with concern for the girl, instinctively wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her into a tight embrace. Fuck. In an instant, a powerful jolt of lightning from the ferocious storm struck his body, sending an excruciating wave of agony that plunged him into darkness. Unbeknownst to him, as he lost consciousness, he remained unaware of the seal on his stomach pulsating and briefly glowing upon being shocked. Ooh. The first thing Gabriel noticed upon awakening from her slumber was the warmth surrounding her. It was not the annoying warmth of summer, but rather a pleasant kind. Wah, she yawned softly as she opened her eyes to take in her surroundings. Imagine her surprise when she noticed that all she could see with her eyes was orange and black. Her senses were on high alert as she made an effort to stand up from the soft and warm surface. What is happening? She tried as hard as she could, but she couldn't stand up due to something tightly wrapped around her waist. Curious, she lowered her hands to feel the restraints and was thoroughly surprised when she felt the soft skin of another person instead of iron or metal shackles. What? She immediately looked up and blushed bright red. Below her lay a man, sleeping sloppily without a care in the world. His face was covered with numerous bruises and a small stream of blood was oozing out of his dry lips. Despite these injuries, the most remarkable features of his face were still clearly visible. 3 perfectly aligned whiskers on each side of his face. Yakai. She exclaimed as soon as she laid eyes on those whiskers. They were the only ones known to possess such extraordinary features. Her assumptions were quickly shattered as she instinctively attempted to sense his energy, only to find none. He has none, she concluded. Trying once more yielded the same result. Lost in her futile attempt to sense his energy, she momentarily forgot that she was still nestled in the embrace of the enigmatic boy. Eek. She squeaked as the arms around her tightened, pulling her closer to the boy's chest. Anticipating even more pressure, she conjured a small bolt of lightning and flicked it at his chest. Ow, she winced as the boy let out a yelp of pain. But she quickly relaxed when his arms finally released her. Without wasting a second, she stood up and quickly moved away from him, causing him to wake up in the process. Her curiosity grew as their eyes, one blue and the other a shimmering azure, locked together. Am I already in heaven? His question caught her off guard, but she regained her composure swiftly. Why do you think that? She couldn't resist asking. Did the boy know about her? Was he a decoy sent by the devils for her? Uncertainty was now raging within her. The boy smiled and said, because my teacher told me that only beautiful women like you live there. Her cheeks flushed with red at the compliment. What is your name? She whispered, trying to avoid any more embarrassing conversation. She was not in the mood for it. Naruto, he mumbled. And what's yours? With determined resolve, he attempted to rise, only to be abruptly thrust back to the ground, a surge of pain coursing through his body. Okay, the injuries are serious this time. His thoughts were interrupted by the girl who abruptly positioned her hands above his body. Naruto was about to ask what she was doing, but he stopped himself as a strange yellow energy engulfed him in its glow. The moment he was engulfed, the first thing he noticed was the unnatural warmth of the energy. It was comforting, and he felt like every part of his body was enjoying the sensation. He hummed in pleasure. You seem to be quite enjoying yourself, Naruto. Upon hearing the question, he turned to look at her, his face turning red as he noticed a gentle smile playing on her lips. Beautiful was the first thought that crossed his mind when he saw that smile. It was undeniably one of the most beautiful things he had ever witnessed, surpassing the bright smiles of Akeno and his Bachan. He didn't know why Akeno's name had flashed into his thoughts, but it effortlessly escaped his lips. Your healing jutsu is amazing. It feels so warm, he murmured softly, groaning as a wave of pleasure swept over his body. Gabriel paused her spell and narrowed her eyes at him. Jutsu? What is that? Another question escaped her lips. The realization finally dawned on him. She, too, was not from here. If there was one thing he had learned over the past few weeks, it was that girls descending from the heavens were never familiar with this place. And they are usually very beautiful. He thought. She even more than others. He immediately added, blushing a little as he did so. The woman in front of him was truly the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She was different from those 2 devils. Are you an angel? The end. Thanks for watching, also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.